A brand new Superman movie is nearly here, so what better time to go back and journey through the original Christopher Reeve films. The first entry is a classic that gave us the John Williams theme and was the first genuine superhero blockbuster. Join us as we discuss Superman. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I'm here to fight for truth, justice, and the American way.
Now that's outdated. It's truth, justice, and a better tomorrow? Is that the new slogan?
Sounds right. I think
that's
so.
What it is, yeah.
But that's not what it is in the movie.
No,
so
it's not.
I'll go with what I got.
It's a relatively recent thing. Maybe a decade ago they said, oh, maybe the American way part's a little bit weird given that it's a worldwide character, so we're going to shift it to something a bit more open.
I remember when that happened. I remember there being like a news story or something. This was before I was even into comics, but there was a news story where it's like Superman just renounced his American identity. He's all this. Oh, it's the end of an era.
I have no doubt that upset a certain very particular group of people. Do you know what it reminds me of? Even though there wasn't as much controversy with this, it reminds me of when Star Trek, and this was a long time ago now, but they changed where no man has gone before to where no one has gone before, because they realized, oh, this is meant to be a progressive, ideal future, and it's kind of weird. So they fixed that. That was in like either the late 70s. It may have been when the movie started. They may have changed that. It was I want to say, but look, I don't know for sure.
I know that there are people who get upset at the color of cups at a Starbucks during the holiday season. Like, everything is up for grabs.
Fair enough, I guess. But yes, welcome everyone. It's the movie podcast. We get together, we talk about movies, we work through franchises or director filmographies, actor filmographies, that kind of thing. Today is the start of a new season. We are here to begin Superman season, because there's a new Superman movie coming out in about 6 weeks' time, 5 weeks' time, something like that, whatever it works out as.
Yeah.
And we've got 5 movies we're going to go through, and then end on the brand new Superman film directed by James Gunn, which is just called Superman. Much like this first one we're going to talk about, it's just called Superman. But we're going to do the 4 movies in that series, and then also Superman Returns, which was kind of like a add-on to it. It was meant to be continuing that in some form, so we'll do that as well. And then we'll do the new one. So that's the plan.
None of the Zack Snyder extended verse stuff. That's its own bucket of monkeys.
It's its own it's its own thing, but it's also like it's not been that long since I feel like I've talked about them in some way or another, even though it wasn't on this show. I mean, hell, one of the first things we ever did, which was kind of episode 0 of Collector's Cut, was the Snyder cut of Justice League. So I feel like we've kind of touched on those things before. It wasn't called Collector's Cut. I'm just saying spiritually it was kind of episode 0 in some ways. Yeah. Whereas our review of the 50 Shades trilogy was episode 0 of Extra Reels. So that's...
I can see the relation. That makes sense.
So, yeah, obviously we're going to talk about Superman 1978 today, directed by Richard Donner. We'll start spoiler free if for some reason you don't know anything about Superman the movie. We'll keep it spoiler light for a bit while we get into some general feelings. And we'll warn you before we get to spoilers. Of course, if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. It helps out a bunch if you do. And you can support everything over in Patreon and get bonus shows and all that kind of thing, or YouTube memberships. But I'll tell you more about all that at the end of the episode. I think first things first with this, just for some context here, with this particular season of Collector's Cut, is that we are both Superman fans. We're both DC Comics fans. We're coming into this with loaded opinions and ideas of what we think makes Superman Superman. So it's coming from a place of maybe a bit more knowledge than your average person who's just going to go see a Superman movie, which does not mean to say that I'm claiming that either of us are encyclopedic experts where we're going to be like saying, hey, this comes from Action Comics 582 or whatever, because no.
Yeah, I wish I had that kind of knowledge under my belt, but like even reading through the IMDb trivia, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. All right, cool.
Yeah. I've been reading Superman comics for about 20 years at this point, and there's still there's just a minefield of things I don't know. It's the way comics are because they've been going for so goddamn long.
Yes. Yep. Especially with stuff like I would say 2000s, like you get back, I would say even like mid 80s before that, it's just a completely different landscape than it is nowadays.
Oh,
like
for sure.
everything has changed.
I mean, yeah, this is all like in the Bronze. This was like the comics were in the Bronze Age, give or take, when this came out. Here's a weird thing. We're further away from this movie than this movie was from the creation of Superman.
Yeah, I realized that when I was sitting like, oh, this was 1978. That was 40 something years ago. Oh, that's insane to me.
Yeah, because Superman was 38, the creation, I believe. So that's 40 years, and then it's been more than 40 years since 78 now, kind of comfortably, in fact. So yeah, I mean, it's wild, but obviously I grew up with this movie. I assume you did as well.
Not really. No.
Okay.
No, I have seen it before. It's been ages, and we'll get to in a little bit. I apparently only ever saw the TV broadcast version, which does have a few differences. Not anything really cut out, but there's one sequence that I was really waiting for, and it never showed up in the theatrical cut that we watched. So, yeah, I mean, I watched it a while back. I know the gist of it. I know the basic beats going into it. It wasn't like I was completely in the dark, but it was something that I haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, I don't know if the TV cut's just the extended cut or if the TV cut's actually a third version off the top of my head, but I suspect I'll probably know. I mean, we'll talk about some of the extra things that are in the longer cut, because I don't know if I can name them all, but I definitely remember a few things that weren't in this version. I do think this version is better paced of the two. For the most part, I think it is the better version because it's just a bit tighter. But there is like one little moment that I did find missing, and I was like, oh, it's a shame that little bit's taken out or shortened. But we'll get into that in a bit. So yeah, both Superman fans, both have lots of opinions and so on and so on. But we'll get into it, and this is kind of interesting as well because it's really the first big mainstream superhero movie. You know, it's the first big mammoth blockbuster of its kind in a lot of ways. I mean, hell, even the term blockbuster was pretty new at the time as well. Jaws only came out like 3 years ago at this point.
Right.
So very wild time to be going back to, and considering, given what superhero movies became by the time we hit the 2010s, this is just such a, like, this is the grandfather of all the superhero movies in many ways. So we'll get into everything.
I think what impressed me the most about this in comparison to modern day stuff is it feels like a movie first,
yes,
and then it just happens to be about a superhero rather than it's a superhero movie.
Yeah, it's one of the things I was thinking about as I was watching it, is that particularly in the second half, once you've gotten through like the periods and stages of like becoming Superman, the plot's not actually that good, right? The biggest complaint I would give this movie is the plot in the back half of this movie and Lex Luthor's plan and all that is hokey. There's weird leaps in logic. There's a lot of things to critique, and sort of, you know, and not just because it's of the time and there's some like goofy cheesy things. Like, I think there's fundamentally problems with it. But like you say, it's a movie. It feels like a movie. It looks cinematic. It's like there's shots where Martha and Clark are standing in the field and the camera's going over the field, and it's like, I was like, this is like Gone with the Wind superhero edition, and it feels like it's trying to be big and special. And I'm thinking of like modern superhero movies, and nothing looks as good as this. Right.
Yeah.
And obviously, yes, visual effects are much better because that's just the fact of technology over 50 years. But like, you know, the new movie that comes out in a month or so's time, that movie almost probably definitely will have a better plot than this film. But I already know from the trailers this is the better looking movie, and the new one almost never had a chance of topping that. So it's got that. And then if I was to give my sort of my basic thing here on this, the two things that make this movie special, the two things that, you know, we talked about the visuals, and this, Richard Donner, director, kind of goes along with that, but the two main things that make this movie special and still worth watching, still worth it for what it is Christopher Reeve as Superman and that performance, and the John Williams music. Those two things make this an all-timer and special, regardless of how arguably bad the plot is in the back half of the movie. And that's why people still care about this. It's why it still captures imaginations, and it's why no matter how anything else you can throw at it, there's still a special feeling in your gut when you're watching certain sequences in this movie. So.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, without going into spoilers on anything specific, there is one sequence in this movie that, by all accounts, in any other modern day superhero movie, is a nothing scene. It is an absolute just part of a montage. We skip by it and it's just to show the hero's doing his hero things. But this movie plays it so earnestly and so just genuinely of like Superman saving the day, and it's not snarky, it's not like all this other tension going on, it's just focused on that I felt myself getting chills over how much I was just reacting to it. And again, it's like a nothing scene, all things considered, but it really works for setting that tone. And then, yeah, like you said, the John Williams score, obviously this is post him doing his stuff on Star Wars. He's already a very established person by this point, but this felt like he was just swinging for the fences to make something that was eternally going to be associated with the character of Superman, and it worked 100%.
I mean, have you heard the music in the trailer for the new one? Finally someone realized, no, those themes and motifs are what we think of when we think of Superman. So yeah, do new things with them. Do, your own little like flourishes on them and whatever else. But we should always just have some elements of that score in Superman, because it just is so baked in to the character. And I have been of the opinion for much time that this is John Williams' best score. And I know that there's a lot of stiff competition because he did Star Wars, he went on to do E.T. and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and a few other big notable ones that stand out as really famous scores. But I do think Superman's his best one. And maybe I'm a little biased because I have more attachment to that as a kid than I do Star Wars. But it's...
Yeah, that's fair.
There's so many like different distinct themes and motifs that I can remember from this movie. Like, it's not just one or two main themes. Like the Smallville theme, the Krypton theme, the love theme, the sort of more playfully hijinks version of the theme. Like, there's all these little bits that I just like, they're ingrained in my head, and like I always know they're about to hit just before they hit when I'm watching the movie. I feel like when I'm watching this particular movie, it's almost like I'm just re-listening to my favorite like orchestral performance, because I'm just like, building up to the next swirl or whatever it is. It's great.
I mean, no spoilers at all here, but it opens up with the opening credits, and that's the standard Superman theme, and I'm just like enjoying that. A part of me was like, I could skip through this. I know they're not going to be showing anything through the opening credits, but I'm not going to. I love the theme here. And then the very next sequence is on Krypton, and they start playing a Krypton theme, and I'm like, 2 for 2, and we haven't even like gotten into anything yet. Like, it's just continuously working here.
Yeah, that Krypton music is absolutely phenomenal. It's and you can sort of like feel the different influences on different parts of the movie. I said the stuff in the fields feels a bit Gone with the Wind. Like, the Krypton stuff, there's clearly a little bit of 2001 in the inspiration. 2001 at the time would have been a decade old when this came out, so you can't tell me they weren't thinking about it. Right. So you've got that, like, it just so it's awe-inspiring, it's awe-dropping constantly, the music in this movie, and it's like I found myself thinking about halfway through, or maybe the movie's biggest asset, and then right as I thought that, I looked at Christopher Reeve do something with his performance and went, oh no, there's a fight between two things. It's Christopher Reeve and it's John Williams, and which one is making this movie? And I think the argument is no, they got two lightning strikes in a bottle, and it's those two things, and it makes this last forever, regardless of how dated everything else might get over time.
I'll agree with you there that those were definitely lightning strikes, but I do want to put forward the third thing that I think is amazing, considering that sometimes we still get this wrong, and that is the compositing and the wireworks that they use to make Superman fly are top tier. Like, there's a few shaky shots. It's gonna happen. Like, I'm not saying that it's perfect the whole way through, but the fact that they did what they did here in the 70s, and then I look at something like late stage George Lucas, and like, it's incredible how good the compositing section is for this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little hit and miss because inherently, depending on the type of like moment they're doing, like, oh, it's an obvious miniature, and you almost feel like, oh, I'm getting a little bit of like mid-era Godzilla vibes from some of the miniatures and some of these shots.
I'm more so
like
talking about the flight sequences more than anything else. The flight sequences are where it really is like, that is Superman. He is flying in that shot, and it is amazing they managed to blend it in as well as they did.
Yeah, I mean, that was very difficult at the time. Like, it's a whole thing. And on the, just to go back to the music for a second, just one anecdote I remember: there was an interview between Christopher Nolan and Richard Donner. Maybe around the time Dark Knight Rises was coming out, maybe something around then, because Richard Donner's obviously passed away for a few years now. But they did an interview, and it was okay. So the guy who made the best Batman movies sitting down to talk to the guy who made Superman, and just sharing stories backwards and forwards. And just the anecdote that always made me laugh from that interview was the little tidbit that originally they had Jerry Goldsmith to do the music. He was going to be the one doing it, and for whatever reason he had to pull out, like scheduling conflict or whatever it was. It doesn't really matter, but for whatever reason he had to cancel. And Christopher Nolan looks over and says, "Oh, so you had to make do with John Williams?" And like they both, he had a bit of a chuckle. And it's just funny because Jerry Goldsmith is very good, and he actually ended up doing the Supergirl score a few years later, interestingly. Now, if you're wondering why aren't we doing Supergirl, it's because there's a new Supergirl movie coming out next year, so we'll do the old one with that. We're not forgetting about it.
Yep.
So don't worry,
tiny
that's
little
coming.
tie-ins. We make it work.
Yeah. So, no, just phenomenal stuff. And it's not that, as much as we're praising these key few things, it's not like there's not other good stuff in the movie. There absolutely is. But those particular 2 or 3 things are so astronomically like out of this world and how good they are that it's lifting everything this enormous amount. So it's saying to get into it. But yeah, there's obviously dumb stuff. There's some stupid stuff. There's some dated things that don't quite merge with my preferred version of some of these ideas that are in Superman, which we'll talk about, stuff like that. And it's quite interesting though. When I was watching, I was trying to pay attention to like some sort of, I'll call them montages of like little Easter egg info dumps where Jor-El's just rabbiting on, but like it's like fading from like line to line, and I'm trying to listen for things. I'm like, okay, how much had they solidified certain ideas in Superman mythos by the time this movie came out? Because there's some things that sound like they're kind of alluding to it, and I'm like, is this because writers of comic books like heard this and expanded upon it later, or is this just like how much made it into the movie? And I genuinely don't know.
Right.
So there's some interesting little things to talk about.
The piece of trivia that's astounding to me, and again, I'm just getting this from trivia sections, is that it was Marlon Brando, who plays Jor-El, who came up with the idea that he should be wearing like the Superman crest.
Oh yeah, I think I knew this. Yeah.
So this essentially the idea that this Superman S is the crest of the House of El is Marlon Brando's idea.
Yeah,
that's amazing to me.
Yeah, to put this, just to keep this straight for the audience, if you don't read comics or whatever, that has been ironclad the reason why the symbol is what it is in the comics since we've been reading comics, since before we've been reading comics. This was such a good idea that it's like, no, he didn't just make an S symbol because he's Superman. This was just naturally his family's logo. And you can even see it in the Krypton scenes at the start. They're all wearing different symbols on their chests, all the different people in the council. So this movie established that idea. This is like, in the same way that the animated series for Batman introduced Harley Quinn, Superman the movie introduced the family symbol, and like that's the idea of what it is, and like so that's amazing. It's amazing stuff. Yeah, but no, what you were saying with the idea that it's this idea of what is baked into continuity and like what is just being made up for the movie and such. There's a few things that I feel like were made for this movie just from the sake of like a visual standpoint, but I have nothing to back it up. It's just vibes based. Yeah. The problem is though is that this movie's so influential to the people making the comics that so much of these things that were made for the movie have become like the family symbol thing. But there's probably other stuff where, like, does the Fortress of Solitude look the way it does in every comic I've ever read? Because that's how it looks in this movie. I was
literally about to type that in. I was literally saying Fortress of Solitude pre-crisis. No, it looks. I mean, okay, so there are a few images that do seem to have a similar sort of ice structure to it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I'm also seeing ones where it is just like in a mountain and stuff like that. So this is kind of the first one where it definitely have like the spiky ice structure to it.
It's just it's fascinating stuff to sort of see, and this is not even new for Superman. Like at this time, like forgive me if I forget the exact details or like what was what, but I think kryptonite, for example, and the fact that he could fly came from the radio show. It wasn't originally the
Yes.
comic book that introduced those elements. So the idea that the different mediums of doing Superman stories introduce new things into the mythos and then they stick is actually like goes all the way back to the 40s. That's something that Superman's done its entire time. So it's well within the history of the character for this movie to have contributed a few things and have them stick.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's something we even get nowadays. I mean, with all the TV shows and stuff like that, occasionally they'll introduce a character on their own and then it'll get folded into comics. So it's not like it's something that's unique to specifically early days Superman, but it is something that has always been present. The fact that it is not just the comics define what Superman is.
Yeah, I think I think maybe it's just we were reading comics now, right? And so we were seeing all of it. But I feel like a lot of it just quickly fades away. Like, oh, they don't stick. Like, they'll try put a character from a TV show in or something, and we all just sort of shrug and go, we don't care about this. Just take him away.
Yeah. I think the last one to really stick in any meaningful sense was Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
I think that was the one that started in the animated show and then everyone just kind of stuck with for a while.
Yeah, it's definitely the big example from the last 30 years. But no, so that's just an interesting thing to look at. I mean, as far as anything else before we get to the spoilers, because it's clear we're both feeling quite positive. I mean, I guess is there a general feeling that you want to get across for the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much in the same boat as you, where I'm very positive on this. I don't see much in the sum of all the parts that I can really say is bad. I think there are a few small things that personally I think are more. It's not so much that it is bad. It feels just more, as you were saying before, dated. It feels like it's much more of we're in the 70s and this is just kind of how we're doing these movies. And it feels very strange to deal with now. My one major complaint here is not even so much the characterization of Lex Luthor, but his cohorts, his group, his posse, whatever you want to call that. The way that they write that just makes it feel a bit too bumbling for what I associate Lex Luthor as. That was my major issue as the plot unfolded. Was I was like, really? This is the guy who's going to be given issues to Superman? Is this guy who is basically doing a Three Stooges sketch with his two little sidekicks? That was my major concern. But everything else in this, there's always something good to say about at least every element at some point in this film.
Yeah, I mean, I like Gene Hackman. I think he isn't a bad choice for Lex. I think he has a lot of charisma and makes his scenes entertaining. But it definitely isn't how I like my Lex Luthor. And I don't even know if in 1978 my version of Lex Luthor even really existed yet. So it's hard to say, like, how much of that is a choice they made and how much of it is maybe just being truer to what was at the time. But there, even like in the movie itself, in its own context, there's like some weird elements or inconsistencies to exactly what his character's supposed to be in this world at this time, in context of like the law. Like, in the one hand, he's like hiding underground in this elaborate lair, and all that, but at the same time, he's also able to like buy up real estate and stuff. And I don't know, it feels like so I don't know, is he hidden? Is he wanted? I mean, he is, but like it doesn't also add up with everything else. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Right.
There's his introduction, more or less, is a bunch of cops are looking for him, and they're saying like, "Oh, this will lead us to Lex Luthor, and we'll get our promotions at the precinct." And then they immediately fold into, and I'm buying up a bunch of real estate. And it's like, I don't think you can do that when you're a wanted felon. I'm pretty sure that's not allowed.
Yeah, it's like, obviously the version of Lex that I typically want in some way, obviously there's some wiggle room here or there, but like, yeah, I want the Lex who's the public figure who, at least to begin with at the start of Superman's career, the general public have no reason to not like him. right? He wants to be the nice billionaire to everyone. He wants to be loved, and part of the reason why he hates Superman is the ego side of things and all that.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much of that was developed by 1978, so I can't really fault the movie, to be honest. It's more just...
Yeah. I mean, I'm all right with it being just this mustache twirling villain that is like everyone knows that he's a bad guy. But again, I want Lex to be that level of competent. I want him to be conniving to the level where I think he can actually pull this off. That's not what was in this movie. This movie, it felt like he was just he felt smart, but it felt like he was smart in the same way as like someone who puts a big red self-destruct button on the center of their panel where it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, it definitely went for a more light-hearted thing with Lex. And yeah, and I do have a couple of things with the ending. One of it's just a big stupid like thing from like a science perspective is just nonsense,
right?
But there's also like a big character thematic thing at the end that also works for me, which I've thought about the last couple of times I've watched the movie, so we'll get into that as well once we're at that point. But I think we can get into the movie though. I think especially since most people will have seen Superman or know enough of it that there's not really that much to spoil, so we can dive in. The thing I always forget every time I start this movie, so we're in spoilers just to be clear, is when this movie starts and we get this like little comic book bit where like the kids looking at Action Comics and it's like 1938, but then it talks about Metropolis as a real place getting hit with depression, and I'm like, oh yeah, I always forget this because it doesn't really feel like it has any bearing on anything, but it's here.
Yeah, it feels like one of those things where, okay, we haven't done an honest to God like comic book movie in this sort of scale before. Do we want to acknowledge that it's a comic? And then they kind of do this halfway bit in between where they're like, oh, Metropolis is this comic city and just go with it, all right?
Yeah, it's a weird little moment. Don't get me wrong, tonally, it's an interesting little feeling. It does make the movie feel... It goes back to that idea of it being a saga and this sort of epic that's told over like the entire life of like Superman by starting like before he's born and sort of like kind of grounding it to a part of human history. But
I mean, for me, I think this opening sequence was supposed to kind of call back a little bit to the feel of the TV show, The Adventures with Superman, starring George Reeves, where, you know, it's black and white and it is set more during that era, that sort of time frame sort of thing. So maybe that was the sort of thing where they're like, let's call back to that. We're going to show that. And then we're going to go into this big fancy ass title sequence that's going to say, nah, this ain't your daddy's Superman.
Oh yeah, this title sequence for its time is like, I mean, these days you just do this on a computer, it's not that hard, but at the time with like doing like optical effects to try and get this like effect of the text like having the depth and flying past the camera and all that, you know, one of the things about older movies is that obviously, you know, surround sound didn't exist. They were in mono, and then there was maybe some stereo in the 80s, and then once you get to the 90s, everything was basically 5.1 as a minimum. It was just a standard at that point. And typically, when they were doing DVDs and Blu-rays, where they were sort of saying, hey, let's go back and remix these old movies into the newer formats so that they can take advantage of stuff, most of the time it was underwhelming. Most of the time it's like, oh, it still just kind of sounds like the old movie, but there'll be a little bit of music from the rears, but they won't really do much with it. Superman's one of the exceptions where they really went out their way. When those credits are flying past your head, you can hear them flying past your head. So they went out of their way to make that work, and it's a very aggressive subwoofer mixing on this as well. So
I don't even have the 5.1. Like, I've just got the standard 2-speaker setup, but like I could tell that in the sound mix there was some extra oomph to some of those hits, because it was really pounding pretty decently.
Oh yeah, see when it gets to the final like credit and it's directed by Richard Donner, the bass as that came on the screen to be like, this is the important name.
Yep.
So absolutely. Also, just something we should mention here before we get into it as well, just for a bit of background on the movie itself, is that Superman 1 and 2 were being shot simultaneously as one big movie.
Yes.
Richard Donner was hired to make both, and they were shooting it as one big thing. But obviously, huge production, mammoth scale. Eventually, it kind of started to fall behind or go over budget or whatever. The producers started getting more and more like, you know, hands-on and like pestering them and whatnot. And it all kind of led to the decision that, oh, but let's just focus on getting the first one finished and out the door, and then we can come back and finish 2. So that's what's happened here, right? One of the things from the ending specifically is actually taken from what was meant to be the end of 2, funnily enough. But the idea is that, what I'm getting at is that the relationship between Donner and the producers deteriorated to such an extent that he did not come back for 2. In fact, they hired another director who actually reshot a good chunk of what he'd already shot for 2, as well as finishing off the rest and rewrote a couple of things and whatnot. I'm just making that clear now because, like, I may reference it later, or you know, like, it's a good bit of background just for knowing how these movies panned out. So, and it's why there's a Donner cut of Superman 2 that came out in like 2005 or whatever it was, which we'll talk about more in the next review. But just wanted to get that out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, without spoiling anything at all about Superman 2, from what I know about it, that might kind of be why Lex was a bit more lighthearted here, to have that dichotomy and that difference with the idea of this being just one big project. Instead, you have the more menacing villains coming about the second one, but based off what we got, that doesn't really help Lex's case in this one.
The movie starts in Krypton. We get some glorious miniatures of like the city built into ice and the dome at the top, all that stuff. Great. Big red sun. And we get Jor-El being the one who's like at the trial, going through the crimes of Zod. Nod? Is that the big guy?
I feel like it's Knock. It might be Nod. That's it.
Some of that. And then Ursula is the woman, right? And they're being tried for crimes. And I think what was so interesting to me watching this again and sort of like thinking about it and really paying attention is like, how much of the information I know about these various characters is in the movie, and how much do they actually, or how much of it am I just bringing to me from knowledge? And I was really paying attention, and they do kind of hint at some things. Like by the end of the scene, after the council's all said guilty, they don't really get specific or say what they were doing, really. It's very vague. But you do get the idea, at least, that Zod wants to take over. Because he's like, hey, Jor-El, join me, right? You can be my second in command. You'll kneel before me, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, they're getting the ideas across, right? He even says out loud, you've disagreed with the council. So they do kind of, like, give a feeling for what the relationship amongst these characters is, even though it doesn't get super specific as to what the three of them were actually doing when they got caught and like put on trial. So it's interesting. But it was obviously visually, you've got the spinning rings around them and all that, and the big faces just to make it all feel very ominous and, you know.
Yeah, it makes it feel very sci-fi. Very. I think they were almost. I don't know if this book was really in public perception or anything like that, but it kind of had the sort of vibe of like a 1984 sort of thing. I know the movie wasn't made yet, but like that's kind of the vibe that was getting out of it.
I think the book was pretty well known.
Okay.
At this time, yeah. Because the book was the 50s, I think, maybe even earlier.
Yeah, I just don't know that. I know it was at least at a head in 1984. I just don't know the in between where it was at.
It was written like decades in advance because it was like 1984 was the future that Orwell was dreaming up, basically, or fearing, I guess is maybe a better word.
I will say, based off of just my little looking here at Zod pre-crisis, which for anybody not in comics means about 1985. Terrence Stamp did a lot more for your image of Zod than you would possibly imagine just in this.
That's another contribution to the comics then, is how we think of Zod and all that. Obviously these three characters get this one scene here, right? And this is something that was always planned. This was set up for the next movie, is we're going to see these characters again. Here's your little tease of them. There's actually, like, one of the things that actually bums me out, and I'm not sure why they didn't still keep it in, even when they decided to finish the first movie first, is, like, originally there was meant to be a cliffhanger at the end of the first movie, where everything else played out pretty much the same, but the nuke that Superman, like, throws out of space when he's, like, saving New Jersey, I think it is, like, that was going to break them out of the Phantom Zone. And right, and you're going to see them break out at the end, and it was going to be like dun 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 next time kind of thing, right? Whereas in Superman 2, what they decide to do is they just give him another nuke crisis to deal with at the start of the movie, so that they can still do that moment. But I'm like, why didn't they just still keep it? Like, at the very least, why not just at the start of Superman 2 flash back to him doing it and then just show what happened as a result of him throwing the nuke into space? You know, like,
yeah,
I don't know. It's still weird.
It might have been a thing again with them switching over directors where they were like, hey, maybe reshoot this, make it your own. Don't have anything with Donner involved as best as you can.
Yeah, it's very strange. Yeah, and then there's a scene after this where it's Jor-El with the council and they're wearing their white tinfoil suits.
They're hyper reflective suits. That's just whatever light is on, it's glowing.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, like to get this sort of glowing effect, it was this certain material, but the material as soon as you started touching it, it would start losing its effect. So they had to sort of resuit them a couple of times and get them to stop touching it and or whatever. It sounded like a bit of a hassle.
I'm sure.
But so this is the scene where he's trying to convince them of Krypton's doom's coming. But again, I'm paying attention to it and I'm like, you know what? It's not actually spelling out exactly what's going on here. It just you get the sense that he's saying that everyone's going to die, and they say no, our opinion is this is nonsense. You're not to tell anyone, or that'll be seen as treason or whatever. So
yeah, I appreciate the fact that they do play up the idea that they don't disagree with the readings. They agree we see all your scientific stuff. We just don't agree with what the end result's going to be. You say it's going to blow up. We say it's just the planet's just going to shift a little bit. We're just undergoing a little bit of a shift there.
Do you know what's so funny is that I do wish that they had something that felt more like a time jump after this scene and the next bit, just because it feels like, and the way it's in the movie, it feels like the end of Krypton happens an hour later, and it makes this council look even more stupid. At least if it's 6 months later and it's been bubbling for a bit, you know.
Well, I mean, they do have Marlon Brando specifically say the planet will explode within 30 days. So there's a 1 month cap on that.
Yeah, I think a bit more vagueness in the time frame and feel like a bit of time has passed would be something. But because the council, obviously, yes, so it's very easy to look back at this now and go, all we're talking about now is climate change and people who are denying that it's happening. And it's very relatable. And it's one of the things that I like that's kind of happened to the origin of Superman over time, is that Krypton's become this kind of fable, this warning of hey, his planet's gone because they didn't listen to the science, and we can kind of adapt that into our real world. But the fact that it's an hour before it happens, they're still saying, nah, we don't agree with the end result of this, and then as soon as he walks out the door, tremors start. It's all right.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I would change just to fix that a little bit is during the trial of Zod, which is set in this weird indeterminate time beforehand.
Yes.
Have a tremor there. It doesn't have to do anything, but just have a tremor. And that would give the hint that this has been continuing this whole time.
Yeah. I mean, and even if you imply there's a bit more of a time jump, maybe say that's the first time Jor-El looks concerned and is I need to look into this. What's going on here? But yeah, we see baby Clark or Kal-El to be more accurate here. Also, weird tidbit. So I'm pulling vague bits of trivia from the documentary, which is really good, and it's on YouTube these days. I remember watching it in the Blu-ray box set back in the day. But they made it when Superman Returns was coming out, and I think it was called Look Up Into the Sky, The Amazing Story of Superman. But it goes through the history and all the movies being made and all the rest of it. And there was a tidbit where Marlon Brando, who by this point was a bit of a weird kooky actor, when he got the job, apparently at one point he turned and said, well, since this Jor-El's an alien, what if I play him like he's a suitcase? And someone had to talk him out of it and convince him why that would be nonsense without insulting him.
I'm sorry, I might have misheard you there. Discord might have cut out. He play him like a what?
Suitcase.
Meaning what?
That's a good question, David. I have no idea what that means.
Well, I don't. He walks into the room, he's like, excuse me, everyone, and then he just sits in a corner and doesn't do anything, because that's what a suitcase does.
It's been a while, forgive me if I'm slightly misconstrued, but it was definitely an inanimate object. But I think it was a suitcase.
All right. Good on him. I mean, I'm glad that they was talked out of that. I will say, I understand that Marlon Brando is not the easiest actor to work with, but one of the few things that's established pretty hard here is that if you're going to be playing a resident of a planet, know how to pronounce the name of your planet.
Krypton.
It is not Krypton, it is Krypton. Everyone says Ton. What are you doing?
I almost felt the same way with Otis Slater, the way he pronounces Luthor every time. Mr. Luthor! Like, he really emphasizes the R at the end in a way that I don't think anyone else does.
I'm mildly all right with that just because it might just be a character quirk, but like this dude, you don't mess up, like, that's mispronouncing Earth. How do you mess that up?
That said, though, on characters yelling names, though, Miss Tessmacher being yelled by Lex is something that I'm fondly, thinking about from time to time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like he only ever said it once, and they just looped it because he yells it in the exact same way every time.
Gene Hackman's just a professional. Okay, that's what
I guess so. Yeah. No, you're right.
That's he's the sort of actor where when he dubs a line, you can never tell because he just nails the exact same delivery every time.
Fair.
Yeah. Actually, to be fair, on dubbing here, when we get to Smallville and we get to young Clark, Christopher Reeve dubbed all those lines so that the voice would be consistent, and I think it looks pretty good. Like they did a good job with it.
I read that trivia probably about 10 minutes after the Smallville section ended, and I was like, seriously? I had no idea. It absolutely... Although apparently, with the extended editions that came out, the TV cuts and all that, he didn't dub the extra scenes there, so every once in a while, the original guy's voice will slip through there, and it's very obvious, apparently.
Oh, interesting. So, yeah, it's that kind of Krypton stuff. We get the big spiky little spaceship. And obviously one of the things that the council said to him, or Jor-El agreed to, was that, neither me or my wife will try and leave the planet. And obviously there's a thing in Superman comics, and sometimes, it was in the Man of Steel movie, I think, for example, this idea that space travel was outlawed, right? That's been in some different interpretations of Superman. And they never say that here. But there is a little interesting bit that maybe implies that it is. It's when Baby Clark's in the ship, and you get sort of like Jor-El's voice talking to him as he's flying through space. One of the little couple of bits that I noticed that were quite interesting is at one point he said something about like I can't remember what the number was, but it was like the 18 known galaxies. He said that at one point. And then he also said, this is the more interesting part, that at the dawn of like time or space travel or whatever, right, whatever the word was, there was like a bloodbath between the first 6 galaxies, and I was like, they don't say that space travel was outlawed, but I wonder if you could sort of retrofit in your head to say, that bloodbath between those 6 galaxies is why Krypton like maybe banned space travel at a certain point or something. I don't know.
I could see it. I mean, I don't think the movie really needs it because obviously Jor-El was pushing for evacuating the planet anyway. So I think even if you say they allow space travel, the council, the elders, whatever they are, basically saying like, we're not going to cause a panic, everything's going to be fine, stop messing with people here. That's enough of a reason for them to not leave the planet.
Oh no, for sure. Yeah,
the banning of space travel is a lot more prevalent when it comes down to why aren't there more Kryptonians in the universe. That's usually the reason for that is like, because they never left.
No, my thinking here wasn't even trying to like justify anything in the movie. I was just looking at it from the perspective of like, was that something that was even thought about or a thing? But when this movie was made, like I'm looking for hints that it's kind of still sleeping through in some weird little ways.
Yeah, and again, back then, pre-crisis, there were a bunch of Kryptonians that did survive. It was only post-crisis that DC editorial was like, okay, Superman's the only one. He's the last son of Krypton. No other Kryptonians can survive, and that's where they have to come up with that no space travel thing.
Yeah, barring the Phantom Zone, of course.
Oh yeah, well, Phantom Zone's not space.
Yeah. Okay, just be clear. So, all right, so you got the Krypton stuff. You got Jor-El making his speech. There's a nice little thing here where, like, Lara, the mum, she keeps like saying things that are negative about sending Clark to Earth, and Jor-El keeps sort of countering with something positive, and it's a really interesting back and forth where she's like a concerned mother who's always thinking of like how you'll feel alienated or different, or you'll be alone, or you'll be this or that. And then he's like countering with he'll be strong, he'll be powerful, he'll be invulnerable, he'll be this, blah, blah, blah. And it's a really interesting thing to sort of have them bounce backwards and forwards like that and see the different mentalities. Because despite the fact that Jor-El doesn't get that much development in this movie, I think it's interesting to present this idea that, okay, he's not like a bad guy, obviously. He wanted to save Krypton and whatever else, but it is interesting later on in the movie, the idea to like put his advice against Jonathan's advice. And I think the idea that him and like the wife are already kind of like representing two viewpoints, and like, you know, it's not just that Jor-El's not God. He's, as much as he's sending his son to Earth, he's not actually a god, and you shouldn't just take everything he says as the gospel. Like, I guess is like, you know, what I'm getting at.
It's this weird change that I only watching it through this time did I realize that Zack Snyder essentially flipped it, where Jor-El was the one who was saying like, you will bring these people, you will make them incredible and do all that stuff. And there is some of that from Jor-El here, but a lot of what their like thing is here is basically saying, will he be safe? Will he be able to survive on this planet? And like, is he going to be okay? And that's what they're pushing for more. It's only when we get down to the planet that Podkent's like, no, you've got a destiny out there. You're going to be something big.
Yeah.
And then he steps into a tornado.
No, that's the other one. That's not this one.
Oh, right. Sorry.
But no, yeah, it's interesting because like there's a line, not in this scene. It's when he gets to the fortress and we get the, you know, the hologram or whatever you want to call it of Jor-El, and he says something. Oh, you've grown up amongst humans, but you are not one of them. And that line sticks out to me as, now what, Jor-El? You're wrong, because part of the point of Superman is that he very much is one of us. So that's kind of one of the heartfelt parts of the whole immigration story that Superman is. And it makes sense that Jor-El wouldn't get that part, that he wouldn't have this sentimentality to the people that he's going to. It completely makes sense that he wouldn't understand that and like make these assumptions or have these beliefs. But it is interesting to sort of notice that. And I think it's one of the things that I think could make the movie truly special is if they kind of had a bit more of that internal, like, which father do I listen to kind of like idea.
Yeah.
You know?
There's that moment right before the very
one
final
moment,
thing that
there's
happens
that
in the third act.
One moment where he hears like two voice flashbacks, and it's like, oh, I love this. I love the idea that Jor-El's saying you cannot do this, but then you hear Kent say you're here to like do something important, and maybe you make this choice, kind of thing. Right. I like it. But anyway, it's interesting stuff. The other thing I was looking for during this as well, but both this scene where they're talking about him, and then later at the fortress when he's talking to him, is okay. The idea that Superman's powers come from the yellow sun because he wasn't born here. Is that a thing in 1978, and how much did they go into? And at first I was thinking no, because at one point Jor-El says in this baby scene, he's like, like, the atmosphere will make him dense, and I'm like, I think it's different. Okay, they've not got the yellow sun thing yet. However, at the fortress at one point, he kind of says it in an indirect way, where he kind of phrases it in a way where he's like sort of like complimentary to his own son, but he's like, oh, our red sun's made you superior to all these like humans on Earth, and I'm like, in a weird way, that's kind of like saying the same thing. He's just sort of like doing it in a sort of propaganda for the red sun, where he's saying, oh, the red sun's made you stronger, but whereas I think typically when we think of it as, oh, because he was born elsewhere, our yellow sun makes him stronger. But you could see how it still works that way around, where he's saying, oh, because of your structure and the way your body absorbs energy from our red sun, it means that you're powerful compared to them. But like, it's kind of in a roundabout way saying the same thing, but it's not something it focuses on, Ben. It's like a quick line.
Yeah, the thing that they say here, I think that really like separates it out is they say, look, because you're on our planet and like you're alien, whatever, you're going to have better senses and you're going to be like more invulnerable. They say like your structure is more dense or whatever. And I think that that's all supposed to be completely separate from like the sun idea. But then when he comes down, obviously the sun does give him like a little bit of an extra charge or whatever. Or at least that's in modern continuity. It's kind of roundabout, like you said here. But I think that there is supposed to be this little extra link where they put in and say like, yeah, you'd have some stuff just because you're an alien. And so even if you're lacking sunlight, you're still going to have it. But also you get this extra stuff because of the sun. I will say I did really appreciate during this sequence the imagery, iconography, whatever it is, of the red sun itself. Because every once in a while they'll just cut back to like a full space shot and showing Krypton in front of it, and it really does give this like overpowering image to it. It really does make it feel like a completely alien world entirely.
Yeah, their sun's much bigger as well, just based on the images in this first chunk of the movie. That's the thing that's about this movie that's really kind of special, and I remember them talking about this in like the various extras and whatnot as well. Is that there's kind of three distinct sections to this movie. There's the space, there's the farm, and then there's Metropolis. And those are and obviously Metropolis is the longest part because it's the entire second half. But the idea that each stage would feel very different visually, and it does, like it absolutely does. Like, you know, when you first get to Earth, it feels so different to anything that was in that first 20 or so minutes. And I was actually surprised that it was a full 20 minutes. Like, I think in my head I remember, the Krypton stuff's like, 5 minutes at the start, and then we're on Earth. Yeah. But no, it's like 20 minutes. Like, it takes some time doing what it's doing. So yeah, good stuff. Obviously Krypton starts to like tremble and get destroyed, and there's like the big crystally ice bits are like going through walls and all sorts, and people are dying. I was waiting for a Wilhelm scream. I did get one later, but not in this section. So, and eventually the epic shot of the planet exploding behind the shuttle, if you will, and the little fragments.
Yeah, that was a bit that got me. I understand that from a special effects perspective, it makes sense for them to just like smash cut both of the things are blown up, planet and star included. But like, why did the star explode? I don't think that was supposed to happen.
Again, that's just something I think that we, in modern continuity, in every version of Superman we've ever read, the sun's still there. It's just the planet that went bad.
I mean, I wouldn't even say it's a continuity thing. I feel like that's the thing where Jor-El says the planet will explode within X number of days or whatever, and then 30 minutes later, suddenly the sun explodes too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one day our sun will die. I mean, it'll happen.
Oh, well, yeah. No. I feel like it's going to be a lot easier to convince people like, hey, did you notice how the sun is, I don't know, expanding rapidly and about to explode? Maybe we should leave.
Probably. I think it would be dead before that happened. I think the temperatures on Earth would probably be like skyrocketing to ridiculous levels.
No, when temperatures skyrocket nowadays, we listen so well.
No, but I'm saying to levels where we just die, like not levels where we're mildly uncomfortable because it's too warm. I'm talking about like 500 degrees Celsius here.
Right. Yeah, I did look up really quick. Apparently the yellow sun thing existed since 1960, so it was at least around since then.
All right, interesting. I think the fact that it's not really mentioned in this movie, it says to me that it's become more solidified since this. I think now it's always a thing, and we see it in different stuff. We see it in the new movies, the TV shows. All of them have referenced the yellow sun like rule, and that's why he is the way he is. And even it's in pop culture to the extent where I read a segment from the Better Call Saul series finale where they described him at one point as like rising up as if he's energized by the yellow sun like Kal-El. They put that in the script to describe how he feels in a moment, and I'm like, so it's absolutely something that is like, at least amongst nerds, like just ironclad now, is that's why he has powers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, with the ship taking off, and then we get the sequence of him going through space, and this one kind of confused me a little bit. I thought I had a grip on it, but then there's a line later on that confused me, and that is he's going through space.
Okay. Actually, I don't know if this is something that comes up in this scene, but this may be what you're referring to.
It's probably the thing.
Yeah. So Jor-El says to him at one point in the fortress later on that because of the weird time space stuff working and all that. By the time you're seeing this at age 18, I will have been dead for like thousands of your years. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. Yes. That's how you're saying it works. Fair enough. Later on, Lex Luthor's like, all right, based on that Superman interview where he never mentioned this, but he claims that Krypton exploded in around 1948. So that means this, and this. And I'm like, but no, it didn't.
But see, that doesn't fit as well. But like maybe, and what I was willing to accept is like maybe he says like relative to me, to like how old I am, that's when it would explode. I'm willing to accept that, but it's stretched thin. What breaks it for me is as we see Kal-El growing up inside this ship, he gets a few years older because it takes I think 4 years they say to fly there. one of the things Jor-El is giving him, because he has all of this data and all this stuff in there, is something about Einstein's theory of relativity. He says the word Einstein in it. And I'm like, how, in any sense, could that have worked? Because this is this is thousands of years ago. You're flying there at that point. There's no way Einstein would have been a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and just for clarification, he like at the start of this like weird montage of him speaking to his baby son, who's not taking any of this in because he's a baby. So why he's doing it is open to debate.
Look, some parents play music for the kids to make it. He just gives dry scientific lectures for 4 years straight.
But there is like a line at the start about like all the known galaxies and histories, and so it's at least implied that for somehow, some way, like he has knowledge of things that Earth knows.
Right?
Like so, it's like okay, he understands Earth to some extent. That said, though, if technically it's thousands of years in the past, then he seems to know a lot about relatively modern Earth.
Yeah, he's like, oh, they will look just like them. Meanwhile, he lands and he's absolutely set in at minimum like 1600s era, which they'd still look the same, but very different behaviors.
Yeah, honestly, that line about it's been thousands of years just weirds everything up, and it feels like I don't know. Did Brando just throw that in?
I'm willing to blame Brando. Yeah. Look, he can have all of the credit for coming up with the House of El crest, but I'm also going to blame him for this.
Yeah. So hey, here's something that you wouldn't get in a modern Superman movie. Superman pee-pee.
No, just talking. Yeah. As soon as that happened, I'm like, I will never see this again.
It's such a weird thing because I feel like I think they're right to never do it now, even though obviously it was innocent in the way it's done, and it's just like, oh, no one cares. Yeah. But it's like, nah, things are weird enough that we would never do this now.
I mean, even if you look at like the next iteration of this, which would have been Smallville, like the kid was naked, but they don't show anything. Yeah. Like it's kept for TV purposes at the very least.
Yeah, this is clearly just from a time where this just wasn't considered actual nudity because it's a child. Like how times have changed in terms of how we think about that sort of stuff.
Could you imagine how fast Zack Snyder or James Gunn would be canceled if they did this shot?
It would be wild. But clearly there was no ill intent here or anything. It was just...
No, of course not. It's entirely innocent, even in the way the scene is presented. But it's one of those things that, like, I'm surprised that Warner Brothers, when they put this on, like, Max or something like that, didn't just chop around or, like, pan and scan to hide it.
Yeah, or just, like, CG on, like, a red, pair of
just
undies.
Red briefs, a red
diaper. But obviously, one of the things here is that Martha and Jonathan are already so old, which always makes me laugh. But I think it's just because they wanted the same actors for when he's a teenager, so it's like, whatever, just pretend they're in their 40s here.
I mean, I'm kind of more all right with that, because obviously there's a thing in the comics where they wanted to have children and it just wasn't working. And in modern day comics, you can have all like the fertility tests and stuff like that to know how easy it is for someone to get pregnant or whatnot. But in this time period, I think it just is easier to say they missed their window. Like it's no longer going to be a thing because they are at that age. And then introducing Clark here makes it so it's their miracle child.
Yeah. I do like the little bit where Jonathan's like, Martha, Clark Kent, are you suggesting what I think? I was like, very good. You're setting up why they call him Clark. Very good.
Yep. And we do immediately get the stuff of he's trying to fix a flat tire, and then Clark just lifts up the back of the truck, showing that he has super strength and all that, letting them know that he's special immediately.
Because they're already saying he's clearly not from around here, but when he does that, they look at each other, then look back round at the thing he landed in and go, wait a minute. Like, it's like they didn't just jump to, he came from space. Like, they just assumed something else. But this moment's
they assume it's probably like a Russian astronaut or something like that at that point, 1950. The other thing, it cuts pretty quickly ahead from this point to when he's a teenager. But the sequence that I was waiting for and expecting, not that I thought it was in this movie, but I just assumed it was in every iteration, was the revelation of like the spacecraft, the like telling him that he's an alien. But they kind of skip over that here.
Okay, I don't think I've ever seen this version. What?
No. I mean, I remember it from the animated TV show of that. There's obviously it in Smallville. Then also They kind of had that in Man of Steel as well, where
Yeah, are you saying you remember a version of this movie where this scene was here? Okay,
No,
that's
I'm
what
saying,
you're saying. Okay,
yeah,
that's fine.
no, I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it to be in this movie, and like I don't remember it being in this, but I just kind of associate it with the thing that's in every iteration, where there's that moment where they say, "Clark, you might be a little bit more special than you think."
I mean, I think the impression here is that at some point they've told him. Like, when we get to him as a teenager, it feels like he's not like unaware of, like, you know, as much as they know, right? He obviously doesn't know what Krypton is, but like I think he knows he crash landed here. I think they've been honest with him at a certain point about that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't just thinking that it would be shown, especially with everything else we get to see in this sequence. But you know, skip over it, no big deal. Just weird.
Yeah. So. I mean, the teenage stuff is you know, it's decent fun. Like, obviously there's a Lana. He's got a crush on her. It's like a simple thing. But the important part here is more this idea of him maturing, and it makes sense that when he's a teenager, he gets frustrated. He's a little bit angsty, right? And he still seems to be like, you know, as far as teenagers go, he seems to be a really nice teenager. Right? He's a really nice kid. But you know, some asshole named Brad like gives him more work by kicking over all the football things. And
as soon as Lana said, "Oh, Brad," I'm like, "Of course it's a Brad. Had to be a Brad."
Yeah, I mean, I think a Chad would even sound worse, but you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure there were Chads back then. Chad feels too 80s.
Maybe. But you know, so he clearly gets a little frustrated, and he kicks the ball, and it goes flying into the stratosphere or whatever, and it's like, okay, this is good stuff because it's showing that he's getting frustrated and he's having to hold back. And that's what the whole conversation, because, you know, he races home, right? And he actually gets there to the point where when they drive past in the car, he's all right. And I know, I'm going to go back and talk about it. I know you want to talk about it. But, you know, he races there and they drive by and like, "Clark, how did you get here?" And he's like, "I ran." And, you know, Jonathan hears this and is like, "Son, are you showing off a little bit, are you?" And it's like, and, you know, I love that in like 5 minutes, this movie does what Smallville struggled to do for seasons and seasons and seasons of a TV show. It does it so succinctly that it's like, hey, you know, you have to hold back. But you get this impression that, like, oh, they've talked about this before. Like, he's clearly talked to his son about how you can't just, you know, let your anger out and you may hurt someone. We don't have to hear that part of it. It's clear that they've already had these conversations, but it's like, hey, like, because he's like, hey, you know, what, shouldn't I, like, do what I'm able to do? Like, you know, like, I could score a touchdown anytime I wanted to. And he's like, yeah, but, you know, I'm pretty sure I think you're here for a reason, and I don't think that reason is to score touchdowns. And obviously one of the lines that Clark says is, you know, should is a bird showing off if it can fly, which is a nice bit of foreshadowing for, you know, but it's this idea that, you know, you shouldn't be using your abilities just to be better than everyone else, right? Which is effectively how he wants to use them right now. He wants to use them to be best at football, to be best at this, to be best at that.
Yeah, I think it does a great threading the needle, though, because obviously the easiest way to go down that path is show him using it for like very selfish purposes. But that's not who Superman is. That's not who Clark is. Even at this younger age, he, like you said, he still is a good kid, but he has these frustrations because he is still a kid. He is still a teen just trying to find his way. So I think they threaded the needle very nicely here of showing, yes, he shows off his powers or whatnot, but it's done in the most innocent way, where he was wronged first, and then he doesn't get revenge or anything like that. He just shows up and says, yeah, you know, I'm here, whatever. So I appreciate the way that they showed it off there, that made it so that, again, in the Smallville sort of way, we don't have to worry about like a full 20 minutes of him going like, "But Dad, why can't I do anything? Everything is awful for me."
Yeah, it works because he's not like, it's not even like, because I almost want to say it's like he just does something that might emasculate the bully a little bit, but it's not even like that's his intention. He's not trying to. He's just trying to say, hey, I'm not like a victim here, right? Like, I'm not you. Like, you've not made me feel weak, and I think that's the big thing with how he portrays himself as Clark Kent. You know, when he's an adult, is that he's accepted that it's okay for people to think that he isn't like super strong, you know, and not like a superhero way, just in like a normal human way. Like, you know, it's okay to appear to be a little nervous or to not, to accept that it's okay to be seen as those things. That's not a weakness necessarily.
No, I think that's kind of what the point of this scene here is, and what he picks up from Pa Kent is that, you know, the best disguise is like doing this stuff is, yeah, you can just get walked over a little bit. You can just get walked on, and no one's going to think anything of you. So that way, when you do use your powers and whatnot, you can be yourself. Like, you can open up like that, and it's going to be two completely separate things. But if you keep on showing off like this, it's not going to be something you can hide.
Yeah, it puts that idea into his head without ever him actually explaining what you just explained, though, which I like. Like, it's not him saying, oh, hey, son, I've got an idea. How about you act like a little bitch, and no one will ever suspect that you're the superhero when the time... You know, he doesn't have to actually explain it out loud. It's kind of there in the... I won't even call it subtext, but just it's there without being said. And I think it's, you know, it's quite smart in the way it does that. Before we get to... Pa croaking, to go back to the running though past the train. So
yes,
this is actually one of the first things that I know what's in the extended cut. There's an extra little bit in the extended cut. So he's running past the train, and you see like a young girl with her parents like notice this teenager running next to the train, keeping up pace, even going a little bit faster. And interesting effect there on the running actually. Like it's a curious little like practical thing they're doing.
It's done very well for what I think they're able to do.
Yes.
But it's the same problem as any time I see running in TV shows, especially at super speed. It's that it never looks like they're actually running.
Yes.
It looks like they're on like a wire or something like that. And that's even nowadays, barely anything is figured out how to successfully do that.
Yeah. So I prefer the theatrical cut for this scene, because I think what the extended cut adds is stupid and raises questions. Because in the extended cut, we get a couple of more lines with this kid, this girl on the train, and the mom says, "Don't be silly, Lois. No one can run that fast." And I'm like,
yeah, because it's one of those things. It's not even like we obviously it's all within the same movie, but it feels like one of those things that you get from a prequel where it's like, no, everything's connected. We gotta have her see him long beforehand, and then again later on.
Yeah, I don't like it for that reason. It's not as egregious as an actual prequel, but I do agree. I don't like it for that reason. But I also don't like it just from the fact that later on, Lois always feels a little older than Clark. Like, she feels a little bit more mature, right? And he feels like the slightly younger, more naive guy. And maybe that doesn't actually have to be a literal age difference, but the idea that she's like 5-6 years younger than him, maybe even a bit more than that, honestly. She seems like 9 or 10 here.
I'm looking at the actual ages. She is actually 4 years older than Christopher Reeve.
That sounds about right to me in terms of like how they look at when they're adults, but it also feels right to me from a character perspective, even if they weren't actually like that age. Like I think their characters feel like she's a little bit older, a little bit more mature, definitely a bit more, city wise and all that, because that's a big part of it.
It feels like there needs to be time, because it feels like Clark, some time passes, whatever, but it feels like he's at the right age to go to the Daily Planet and start out as a reporter low down. Like, he's at the right age to do that as he starts. Whereas Lois feels like she should have been there already for a little bit. Not forever, but at least like 4 to 5 years. So that's I feel like the time difference is right for that.
Yeah. So I think this girl being Lois was a whatever mistake, and I think they were right to cut it out. So it's one of the reasons why I prefer the theatrical cut, is that it gets rid of it.
Yeah.
So
fair enough.
She's just a stranger in the theatrical cut, and that's better.
Yeah.
So I actually really like the moment of Jonathan's death. I mean, the actor has like 2 scenes in the movie, but God, that moment where he holds his arm and he realizes that he's dying and says, "Oh no," it hits. Like, he nails it.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's so good.
Absolutely. I was watching that scene, and all I could think about was putting the hand out and going into the tornado and thinking, why did it have to be that big when this is working so much better at accomplishing the same thing?
Well, it's. I mean, for one, I do think like it accomplishes so much more with less screen time, but yeah, like I think it's important that the death of, if you're going to do the parent dies early in Clark's life, which they don't always do. In the new movie, seems like Jonathan Kent's still around when he's a Superman, and I'm fine with that as well. I like both Kents being alive, but if you're going to do the one dies, usually the Jonathan character, then it should be a normal, mundane, natural death. It should be something that truly makes Superman feel like, I have no power over this. Like the mortality of the people around me, and possibly one day himself, but obviously is a question of like how long does Superman live because of who he is. But like the idea that, yeah, he can't do anything about that, and it still makes the life around him precious. And if anything, should further motivate him to save everyone that he can when there is a possibility of saving someone, because, hey, they might only have a week left because something natural might take them, but that week's worth it, kind of thing. You know, like they're like, yeah, you know, that moment when they're at the grave, and like the only reference I think to this place being called Smallville is the cemetery. There's like a sign that says Smallville Cemetery. So, you know, yeah, that moment of like, oh, all these powers and I couldn't save him. Like, I mean, arguably maybe that line's a bit on the nose, but I do think that's kind of the point of like the way Jonathan dies.
Yeah, no, it needs to be something that is small, and yet Superman, with all of his power, can't stop. Like he there's no way he could do anything to stop it, and it gives him that perspective. It gives him the difference of saying, like you're saying, you know, all life is precious, that sort of stuff like that. But even just this line of Superman can't do anything. Like no matter how hard you try, there's still going to be the ability for you to fail. And I think that's important to the character to make him continue to try his hardest no matter what, because he knows that there is always that potential for him to not be there in time, which obviously plays very heavily into the third act of this movie.
Yeah, for sure. So it's all smart setup for later, and I think that despite only getting one real scene with Clark and Jonathan, like it nails the advice, it nails the lessons that Jonathan's teaching, and this idea of like, you know, doing the right thing. And there's other things they could have went into. It's not like everything they could have added would have been too much. Like, you know, I like the idea of like exploring, you know, the frustration of having to hold back because he could hurt someone, right? You know, like I don't really want what Smallville did, which was like, you know, episodes and episodes of like Clark going, I want to play sports. Like, you can't play sports, son, you'll hurt someone. Like, you know, that was like over and over again they did that.
Look, I'll take that compared to like, why can't I be with Lana?
Oh dear. Actually, not to turn this on to shit in Smallville, but one of the things that irked me, and the Kents arguably are the best part of Smallville. They're the part that actually feels like the most right in terms of Superman. But one of the things that do piss me off about the Kents in that show is like, at no point do they like, or it takes a long time anyway. But you know, obviously at certain points, Clark's like, oh, I think I'm in love with Lana. I think I'm going to tell her everything, and like, there's this attitude from Jonathan of like, oh, you could never tell anyone ever. And I'm like, surely if you love your son, and if he's going to be happy someday in a relationship, he has to tell whoever he ends up with what he really is.
Look, I feel like that storyline should have been immediately tossed away the moment that Pete Ross found out. The moment that happened and everything was like, okay, it's like, okay, yeah, sure, tell your friends, whatever.
It's, yeah, I just, it's one of those things where they're just milking it for extra drama, and it's just, you know, anyway. So, yeah, death happens. He's, you know, obviously he's near the end of high school at this point. He wakes up one night sensing something, and the green crystal that was put in his ship is in the barn, right? Usually it's the whole ship that's buried in the barn, but here it's just the crystal. And it's emanating some energy. It's calling to him, and
I think my only thing with this scene is I don't like the choice of making it green just because there's the connotation of kryptonite.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Like as soon as he was reaching for it, I'm like, you're gonna die. You're gonna die if you do that. Don't do it.
It could just light up white rather than green just to differentiate it. But you know, that's whatever. I think it's a big deal. But he obviously gets a sense that he has to go somewhere, and we get like some of this great stuff with Martha seeing him out in the field and coming out to talk to him. Again, another great music piece by John Williams here. As he's like, hey, I need to leave, you know, for some time. And she's like, I knew this day would come, and like, you know, they hug, and it's like, and it's not like a goodbye forever, but it's like, you know, I need to go and like find who I am and do my exploring and whatnot.
I've got my quest. I'm gonna go do my quest now.
So, you know, he says he's going north, transition to him walking seemingly in the North Pole. which, you know, it's a set, it's a soundstage and whatnot, but it's a pretty impressive soundstage. Like, it's, you know, they've got water, they've got floating, you know, bits of fake ice. It's a whole shebang. And the creation of the Fortress of Solitude, he throws it, it's a big epic moment. I think where my critiques come in for the Fortress part here, you know, the sort of this monologue from Jor-El that leads to the transition to Superman, I think obviously it feels like this weird mystical thing where, you know, the camera's floating through space as he's explaining things, and it's like time is moving forward, and it's like he's getting lessons over, like, you know, about 12 or so years until he's, you know, ready to come back as Superman.
Like, every once in a while the voice will come up and say, like, and for our 5th year we'll be looking into da-da-da-da-da.
Now, I think in my head, I always retcon this a little bit to be like, well, yeah, he's coming to the Fortress for lessons throughout these 12 years. But there is actually a line or two from Jor-El here that implies that he's actually just taking him into space for 12 years. And it opens all these questions of, like, but how? What technology have you got in the Fortress that's beamed him into space? I don't know, it's weird.
I didn't get the exact idea that it was him going into space, but they brought up that thing again that they did before of, like, the 28 known galaxies or whatever. Yeah. And I basically took it as, we've got, like, basically a sensory deprivation tank. We're going to shove you in it for like 12 years, and we're just going to beam all of the knowledge of our people into you. And you're going to learn everything you need to learn about being Kryptonian with all these new powers and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think there's a reason, though, why almost every version since this, when they're doing the origin or the early days or whatever, they kind of establish that, yes, well, he's going to the Fortress and learning over time about his culture and where he came from and all that. You know, there's a lot of, like, Clark, you know, in Birthright, for example, the Mark Waid version of the origin story, where he's traveling and getting involved with people as, like, a young reporter and stuff like that. You know, this idea that he's just literally gone from all of Earth. Maybe he's in the North Pole still in the Fortress, but that he's just away from everything for 12 years is something that I think most modern versions of Superman have shied away from, because it just feels a bit unrealistic, I guess. I know it sounds silly given, you know, he's an alien and all the powers and all that, but it does feel a little bit weird.
No, I think that it also kind of makes sense, because if you really think about it, what is Jor-El teaching him? Like, what is gonna take 12 years to get across? Because he already knows about his super strength. He already knows about his super speed. The only thing that we definitively get coming out of this sequence is the costume and flight. Those are the only things that we absolutely know he did not have beforehand, and he learns coming out of it.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, though. Like we were saying at the start, for the faults that it maybe has from a storytelling perspective, and I would sort of, like, ascribe this to storytelling, the cinematic way it's presented is freaking phenomenal. Like, the way that at the end of that monologue where he says, you know, like, they're good people, they want to be, and for that I give them.
They have a great capacity for good.
And for that I give them you, my only son. And then his face turns to, like, crystal, and it spins round. We go through the eye, and he's standing there in the outfit. It's cinema. It's got that, like, as much as I'm nitpicking, like, the context of what any of this means and what's actually happening in this time period and whatnot, the way it transitions to him at the end and he takes flight as the Superman theme strums up is beautiful.
Yeah. No, like, that whole sequence, it's great. It's fine. If you sit down and you think about it, then it falls apart in a lot of ways. But vibes?
Yes.
It's beautiful, majestic.
Yes. It goes back to that thing we said at the start. It is a film first, and it is a superhero adaptation second. And that comes with positives and negatives. But one of the positives is how good it looks and how good it feels.
Yes. So this is a 2 hour and 27 minute long movie. And you said it was broken down into 3 parts.
Yes.
Space, Smallville, Metropolis. We are 45 minutes in. And this is the official end of the first 2 parts, moving into Metropolis.
It's a weird structure, because I think technically you'd have to call everything up until now Act 1 if you're going to break it into 3. But I would kind of argue that those are 2 acts, and then we get at least 2 acts after this.
Yeah, I'd say it probably goes more 5-act structure. I'm not as familiar with how those 5 acts would go compared to 3 acts, but it doesn't feel like a 3-act movie.
Not at all. It has a very unique, for a movie, it has a very unique structure. So, yeah, we just cut to Metropolis, and this is probably where we should talk about the fact that they are just straight up using New York. Now, to be fair, it's 1978. They don't have a lot of options for doing a fake city, so that's fine. I will say, though, when they're flying later and they specifically go around the Statue of Liberty, I'm like, can we at least avoid the very famous monuments?
Pete, that's the Statue of Justice, which has always been in Metropolis. I don't know what you're talking about.
Like, I get that we can't have a vastly different skyline in this time period that would look good necessarily, but just don't draw attention to the very obvious New York things, please.
Yeah. I mean, I would even be theoretically okay with just saying, like, New York skyline, as long as they could, every once in a while, do a little map painting that shows me the Daily Planet globe.
Yes.
You give me that much, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Or at least give me a close-up of the front of the Statue of Liberty that literally has a name on it that's different. Like the Metropolis Statue of whatever, I don't know.
Statue of Justice, I already said it.
There you go, Statue of Justice. Yeah, call it that, whatever. Yep. But anyway, so we get him at the Daily Planet. We get the chaos of the Daily Planet. Jimmy going around taking his photos, and Lois can't spell. That's the first thing we learn about Lois Lane. She cannot spell.
Yeah. And it's always the, like, strangest words, too. It's like, how many T's in bloodletting? And I'm like, what are you writing?
Well, it's a running... Well, I think it's clear what she's writing. They reference it a couple times, but it's like a sex-crazed killer, because, like, there's at one point, it's like there's only one P in rapist. That's something that Perry said, which is actually a really dark line just in the middle of your Superman story. Yep. But it you know, there's no Z in Brazier. You know, just it's all these words that tie into the idea that she's writing about like a sex crazed killer. That's what she's talking about.
It took me off guard to start with, because they explore that later, but the very first thing basically she says to Jimmy is, how many T's in bloodletting? And then the next word is like, how do you spell massacre? I'm like, Jesus, Lois, what beat are you on?
I'm like, Lois, you were born too early in this version because spell check doesn't exist yet. But do you think that's why they don't do it as much anymore? Because I'm like, she has spell check now. She doesn't have to ask how to spell things.
I was going to say, I want a writer to just take a tiny little bit where it's like, I accidentally turned spell check off on my phone, and it's all been hell since then.
They reference it every so often in the comics, but I'm thinking of the various adaptations recently, you know, Superman and Lois, the TV show, or whatever we've had in the last few years, and like it's not really come up, the spelling thing, and I wonder if it's just because it is kind of outdated because spell check just fixes that for her. So
yeah, I was going to say I don't remember anything about Amy Adams' adaptation having anything like that.
No. I mean, that was the least of those movies' problems, obviously, but it would be nice just for one little joke of like, oh, when she has to spell something without a computer or something, that she just messes it up, and they can, you know, so they like, give a nod.
Have Clark pick up like her notepad or whatever of like her writing and just being like, what are these words? What were you even trying for here?
Are you sure I'm the alien? Because you're the one writing like you've never seen the language before.
Right. Oh, you know Kryptonian runes as well. Cool.
So so we get Perry as well. We get it's like, I actually really like, there's a little joke here. Obviously they nail the dynamics here where Clark's trying to introduce himself to Lois and she's too busy to pay attention to him, but Jimmy's happy to introduce himself. But the joke here I really like is that when she like sort of goes back in through the door and says, "That's my beat, Chief," like what the hell, he's like, not only does he give his editor-in-chief the proper respect, not only does he, like, you know, give this type of prose that's really good, but in my 40 years in this business, he's the fastest typist I've ever seen, is a legitimately funny line.
Yeah. He doesn't get a lot, but Perry White is a very solid character here.
Yeah, he's not my favorite version of Perry. But honestly, my favorite Perry and my favorite Lois on screen are both from Lois and Clark. Terry Hatcher is Lois, and Lane Smith, I think the actor's name was, for Perry White. They're my favorite versions on screen of those, but these are both solid. And Margot Kidder is a really good Lois, and this is a good Perry. It's, you know, it's just that you know, there are other versions that I think are a little bit better, whereas no one's topped Reeve yet. Like, Reeve is still Superman. Like, no one's touched it yet. You know, now there's been no good ones, but he has not been matched.
No, he's absolutely top of the line. So yeah, I mean, this sequence, if I do have to critique a little bit of the pacing here. I think that this sequence of getting out of the Daily Planet and Clark just kind of trailing along, it does eventually lead to a sequence I like, but there's a good 2 minutes in here that I think could have just been lopped out. It's just kind of a lot of showing that Lois is busy. That's kind of all we're doing here.
Yeah, and Clark can't get a word in. Also, it would cut out something that I can't not notice anymore. Which is when they're coming out of the building and the reflection of the glass, because they stop the spinning door, the revolving door stops for a second. The entire time it stopped, you can see the director in the reflection.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, and once you've noticed it, you'll never like be able to not see it again. It's there.
Tragic.
Because there's a little moment where he kind of like pokes his head out as if he's checking something, and you're like, yeah, you're not like a passer, but you're part of the crew. And I'm pretty sure
there he is. Yeah. No, I see him.
Yeah,
damn,
he's there. And it's so blatant. It's kind of like there's a shot in The Matrix where they're going to open the door to the Oracle's place, and there's like a camera in a bag, like in the reflection, and they're trying to hide it as best they can. But once you've noticed it, you can never not notice it again.
At least that's with the awareness that they knew they were going to be messing with the reflection. This one feels like it was like, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, obviously it's the sort of thing where if it happened in a movie now, they would just digitally do some tinkering to get rid of it, but don't touch it. Yeah, the whole thing is this builds up to like a mugger in like the alleyway, like pulling them in at gunpoint. Can I just say, this is the sharpest dressed mugger I have ever seen in a movie.
That's kind of the thing that I was getting from this, is that this feels like what it's trying to do is be, 1960s, 1970s, pretty modern, more or less, in terms of its setting. But in terms of dress and fashion and stuff like that, there is still kind of this older school vibe to it. This old 1930s era.
There's definitely a little bit of
gangster in the dress up. Yeah,
because Clark's hat, for example, is very old school, even for this time period. I think it feels like a 1930s or 40s type of hat. I think they're intentionally sort of mixing it. I think, which honestly kind of helps it in a weird way. It's the sort of thing where if you use classical music in a 2001, for example, it helps not date it because it's already old music. And I think in the same way here, a lot of the fashion doesn't feel dated in a weird way because it's already kind of retro when this movie came out.
Yeah. Honestly, that was one of the things that set me off the most when End of Man of Steel, we got to the Daily Planet, was how modern it looked. I'm like, that doesn't feel right. I'm expecting typewriters and like all that other newspapery stuff. Everyone's on computers. What's going on here?
Sometimes things make sense though, because I won't say too much because I know you tend to avoid the trailers. But there's a quick glimpse in the trailer of what I assume is Cat Grant. I don't know for sure, but there's a shot in the trailer of a woman inside a building taking a selfie with holding her fingers up, and Superman's in the background. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, Cat Grant would do that. Cat Grant's existed from before smartphones, but Cat Grant absolutely would be taking a selfie and like doing like a stupid Instagram pose in front of Superman. Like,
yeah, I'm all right with that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Like, that just works. So, as much as spell check's taking something from Lois, it's giving lots to Cat Grant.
Yes. Cat Grant will be the next Lois Lane.
Or she wants to be.
Yeah,
Cat Grant's jealousy of Lois Lane is one of my favorite running character bits in comics, frankly.
I love how alienating this is to people who don't read the comics. They're like, what the hell's a Cat Grant?
She's been on various shows and things at this point.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
Anyway, so we have this mugging bit, and it's just basically, it's like, it shows that Lois isn't willing to go down without a fight. Clark's acting like he's, very timid and just do what he says, Lois. And of course, when Lois tries to fight back, it results in the guy firing his gun. And the only reason why she's not dead is because Clark's there to, grab the bullet. And
and then he slops down on the ground as if he fainted from all the stress of the situation.
And what I love about this, though, is that it does establish this main character dynamic for Lois, where obviously, especially, maybe not so much in the movies because there's just a few of them, but like in the comics or TV shows or whatever, it's like she's constantly needing to be saved by Superman, which could make her look like a bit of a damsel. But one of my favorite things about the character of Lois Lane is that it's not because she is like, prone to things. It's like she actually puts herself in a lot of danger because she's too stubborn to like accept that she's doing something stupid, right? Because she wants the story, or in this case, because she's not willing to just let the mugger take her purse. So she's like, no, I'm fighting back.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing where she's writing this article about the sex-crazed maniac killer or whatever. She would absolutely be the type to be like, well, I'm going down to this dark alley to see if I can get some hits on wherever this attacker's going to go next. It's like, yep, you do you, Lois. Anything for the story.
Yeah, it's like a character flaw that makes sense in a lot of ways, and is a part of who Lois Lane is. So I actually really like that a little bit. And obviously she seems a little disappointed where she's genuinely worried about Clark at first when she thinks she's been shot. And then when he's like, oh, gee, I guess I fainted. She's like, fainted? Like, oh, you can almost hear in her head, oh, he's such a loser, Clark. She gets up.
I do love, this is pretty much the first time it happens. It happens throughout the movie, though, is that little grin that Christopher Reeve gets whenever he reveals, like, ho, 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 I caught the bullet. I'm so cheeky like that.
It's, just to skip ahead to it, there's the moment where he's in the apartment and he takes off the glasses and he, like, straightens up and becomes Superman, even though he's still wearing the civvy clothes, and it's like, oh man, this performance, this little moment, this kind of thing that made him perfect. Yeah. He got it in such a way. But yeah, so then we're introduced to Lex, and we get Otis first, obviously, because the cops follow Otis back to his secret lair, which is an old, like, abandoned subway station that's been, like, converted into this wild lair with a pool. It's
an alternate timeline where the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles didn't exist.
It's so elaborate. I love it as a set, but I don't feel that Lex should be hiding in a place like this. So I'm conflicted, but it's cool. So
yeah, exactly. If this were conniving evil scientist Lex, I could forgive this because it feels like a lair. It feels like I'm off the grid, like nobody can find me, da-da-da. But this is con artist, real estate Lex, and it feels like that guy should be in a high rise, you know?
Dear. So, yeah, there's a whole extended bit here, but, you know, we're already like 90 minutes out of this, so I'm going to speed through some of this.
It's so fast, yeah.
I'm going to speed through some of this. Point is, Otis is a doofus. He tries to rob a blind man who's got a little store. The dog doesn't let him away with it. But Lex is pissed at him. I do, like, as much as Otis is kind of like a whatever character, I do like the moment where he comes in, and Lex has obviously used the door to kill the cop that was trying to get into their lair with his button and whatnot. But when Otis comes in, he's like, you were fouled again, Otis. And the way Otis sort of turns around and knocks over the lamp as if he's expecting to see someone right behind him is a little funny. It's a little chuckle-worthy. You know, I'll give it.
Yeah, I like the dynamic between Otis and Lex for any other character. I think that they are solidly like the smart one and the doofus, the con artist and the muscle. I like that as a pairing, but it's just a bit too Looney Tunes for what I'm wanting from Lex. That's what it is.
For sure.
And there's obviously Tess as well.
Yeah, and I think there's some later scenes that are more guilty. You know, like the moving the ladder away when he's up looking at a book or whatever, that kind of thing.
Right.
You know, if I just to stick on Lex for a bit here, because obviously we cut back to him a few times before we get to when he actually intersects with Superman. Right. I think the scene where he's in the pool, and this is where he kind of says, oh yeah, I don't like the Superman guy. That feels kind of like lame to me, and it just doesn't feel like it's that justified yet, that he doesn't like Superman. It just feels like it's coming out of nowhere. But the scene that really bugs me is when he just somehow connects some dots to say, yeah, let's get this kryptonite stuff, that'll hurt him. I'm like, and what the connection, the way he gets to that conclusion is just pulled so out of his ass that it's like, like whatever. Okay, whatever.
Honestly, this is the thing that I've never seen done well in a live action version is how does Lex figure out kryptonite works? Like, I've never seen it done well in a live action thing. There's every once in a while they'll do something where, like, you know, he learns a little bit of it over time, but this is, I think, the worst of it where, again, we have that whole issue with how long was Kal-El even in space and how far away Krypton is. But then, yeah, he's just like, he pulls down like an almanac off of his shelf and like flips through some pages and says, check it out. This meteorite was discovered a few years ago. And so that must be something that can kill him because radiation. It's like, what are you where are you getting this from? What is happening?
Just jumps to it. It feels like, you know, it's like, part of it may just be that, oh, we had to spend, 45 minutes doing all of the other sections of the movie. We just have to kind of rush the Lex stuff, and it is what it is.
I mean, yes, but at the same point, I would cut out the whole trying to steal from the dog and getting caught thing.
Oh, yeah,
I would
for
cut
sure.
out the walking down the street and having the cops follow. Just pick up with him saying, "Hey, doofus, help me out here."
Yeah. No, that's fair. But obviously the next stuff with Superman and Lois is the big night. It's the big like outing of Superman.
Yes.
You know, so we have like him try to ask her out, and she's like, "Oh, I'm booked." You know, she's not even mean about it. She's like, "Oh, you know, like I'm going to go harass the president at Air Force One because I demand some answers."
I'm taking the chopper to get there.
Yeah. And, you know, he's like, "Oh, can I take it to the airport?" Not unless you can fly. It's like, okay, so she's getting a chopper. Cool, right? And of course, like, you know, there's almost like a Final Destination-esque accident that that causes the chopper to like go out of control and like dangle over the edge of the building. But once you hear, like, you know, once Clark walks out of the building, right, and he looks up and he sees it, and you just get the dun 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 dun, and it starts to build. Right,
Yep.
and it just like, and I love it. Just like, obviously, there's the moment where he looks at the phone booth, but it's not like a booth. It's just like a, you know, it's just got like a couple of dividers. Right? It's not like an actual
Cubby,
thing.
yeah.
And he sort of looks it up and down. Everyone remembers that moment. It's like a little joke. It's like even in 1978, they're making a little joke about the old Superman like tropes in this movie. But I love even just the shot where it starts up and almost like a close up of the phone thing and pulls back to a wider shot.
Right.
It just gives it this dynamic kind of feel to it. But it's like, okay, he's looking around, we cut back up to Lois for a second, and then it's like, okay, I need to find a place, and he's running across to the revolving door, and we get the iconic shirt open, revealing the chest moment.
Yep.
Blah blah blah. Flies up, you know, and the "I've got you, who's got you" like exchange is just one of the, like, there was an animated movie they did a few years ago. Based on the death of Superman, the second time they did that, because they did like one called Doomsday like 10 years before that, but they did it again because they thought we can do this better, and it's actually one of the better animated movies they did of that era. But they did like a cool thing when Superman's injured in that movie after a fight with Doomsday, and he almost collapses, and Lois catches him and says, "I've got you," and he says, "Who's got you?" And it was such a good reference, because it was like, oh man, this is like, obviously there's the more concrete things like the you know, the House of L symbol being like the family symbol and not just an S because it's Superman, but this is also feels like something that's ingrained into like Superman history now, is this like this exchange, almost to the point where if you're going to redo the first time Superman saves Lois, I almost think it's criminal if you don't in some way include the line.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
It's one of those things that, like, I feel like if you force it in too hard, it could come off poorly, but it's something that any competent writer should be able to at least allude to in some way. Yeah,
because it sells her disbelief. It sells all, you know, like the moment and what's happening. Obviously, the chopper comes down after, and he catches that. And if I ever critique, it's that the crowd start clapping way too quick. They should be in shock for a good 30 seconds before one of them starts a slow clap or something. Like they're just immediately cheering.
Yeah.
But you know,
but so this was the first. It's the first of basically the montage of him going around saving things. But this is the moment where, like, yes, it's the first time he's been shown and all that, but just the crowd looking up and cheering. It's so honest. It's so, like, small within its own right. It's just catching one person and then setting the helicopter up. But it feels more heroic than anything I've seen in a superhero movie since forever. Like, everyone is just treating it so earnestly and so, like, yeah, he did it, woo. Like, it's nice. It's good feeling, rather than, like, I didn't expect from this movie the cut to the news where it's like, people are afraid of this new thing that's shown up in our city because fear and everything else has to be wrong all the time. It's like, no, this is just a good thing. We're allowed to just have good things.
Yeah, and, you know, as soon as he gets up to the roof again, he's like, "Hey, guys, this pilot needs help," because, you know, the pilot's like in the front of the helicopter, like badly injured. And, you know, he has his first little exchange with Lois, and, you know, he's very confident. He's very different to what he's been as Clark, and he's, you know, statistically speaking, this is the safest way to travel. You know, all that stuff. And then, you know, her fainting at the end, the comical, and that leads us into the actual montage of, like, just all the things he does on night one, like, you know, the first night of Superman, like, on the case, as it were. And you've got the old school cat burglar. You get up the side of the building with the suction cups, and him just sort of standing there and catching him. which is good fun, and I'm dropping him off with the police officer. You've got the boat and like the bad guys on the boat with the crowbar, and then he brings the whole boat in, which actually ties back to the cop because he's like trying to tell the other cop at the station, there was this guy and he was flying. He was wearing blue. He had a red cape.
Red boots, red cape, blue suit. And the guy's like, yeah, why don't you go down to the bar and continue drinking?
Yeah. So one of the bits that it's a shame it's not here because the extended cut has a longer version of one of the bits here. May have an extended version of a couple of them. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the one that's definitely longer in the extended cut is the saving the cat out the tree scene.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
That's still here. You know, he saves the cat out the tree and he gives it to the girl, and the girl is like, you know, thanks. And you hear the mum kind of slap her when she goes in because she says, "Oh, some guy was flying outside."
Took me off. Just that moment where she started running and being like, "Mom," and she explains the whole situation exactly as it happens, and the mom just says, "What did I tell you about lying?" And you just hear a smack as then it hard cuts into the next scene, and I'm like, "Damn, all right."
So in the longer version of this, there's an interesting little bit where when he hands the cat back over, she says something like, "Oh, that stupid cat," or you know, she sort of like basically gets mad at the cat for going up in the tree. And Superman basically says, "Hey," I remember what he says. I can't remember what the lines were, but he's basically just like, "Hey, no, the cat didn't know it was doing something wrong. Like, have empathy for it." He's basically just trying to teach the kid empathy and makes her understand that she shouldn't be mad at it. And it actually, in a weird way, made the ending of the scene, because I think in the theatrical cut, the ending with the slaps actually a little bit funny because it's just like, oh, the mom doesn't believe her and she hits her. I think in the extended version, because it sets up that she immediately was mad at the cat, the same way that her mum was mad at her for lying, it kind of like presents this idea that he is like has given her like a good influence in maybe a way that her parents aren't right now. Like maybe her attitude towards the cat comes from her parents. Like there was a little extra layer to it because of the extra bit.
That's how it sounds to me. It sounds to me like it's kind of just building the character a little bit of showing like she responds negatively because the parents respond negatively to her, and having Superman would just try to break that cycle a little bit. Yeah,
so it's a shame that isn't in the theatrical cut because it is genuinely a nice little addition. You know, it's maybe like 20 extra seconds. It's not much, but it's something. We also get obviously a plane's engine blows up and Superman like fills in and just holds up the plane, and the pilots are like, huh?
Again, like, it's fine within its own right, but in this montage setting, I kind of wish pacing-wise it was moving just a little bit faster, because we get the whole, he's holding up the wing, and they have to do this whole weird line bit where the pilot turns to the other one after looking out the window and be like, just keep flying. And that'd be fine, have that line, but then he keeps going with like, there's something out there, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but just trust me, you're going to keep flying. It's like, just short and sweet. It'll work better.
Yeah. I mean, I like the actual visual of him holding up the plane.
The moment itself is, I want it in the montage. I just wish it was a little bit quicker on the beat.
Yeah, that's fair. So, next day, like everyone, like Perry's like, we need to get a name for this guy. Like, what is he like? What was all this? And Clark, the sly bugger, has given a note to Lois that, it just says, I'll meet you tonight, a friend, which is what he said he was when he talked to her before. So this sets up the Lois interview, or the date, if you will.
Yes.
So Superman arrives at her place. She's got very dressed up for it. In fact, he even kind of like pokes fun at her for it, like in a nice way, where he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, did you have plans tonight?" And he's like going to leave. He's like, "Oh no, this whole thing. No. Just put this on. You come."
Yeah. If you ever want a breakdown in like a writing class or something like that on how to properly do flirting between two characters, this is it. Like, this is the best description of just openly flirting I have ever seen put to cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue there's a couple of lines that almost go a little too on the nose, where she's like, "And your bodily functions, are they all, and then she sort of like realizes she's dug a hole for herself and goes, "Eating, do you eat?" And like, that's not what you were asking about. Like, you were asking about his erections. That's what you were asking about.
No, the pivot to that is her like just trying to get some basic facts, and she's like, "So, how big are you? I mean, how tall are you?"
And I love how she's trying to, like, because we've seen how confident Lois is around Clark and how much she's like, taking on the world. So it's actually really entertaining to watch her get flustered and like almost try to pretend that she knows things when she wouldn't, obviously. Like, when he mentions Krypton, for example, she's like, oh yeah, Krypton, yeah. At least she sort of, like, responds as if she's heard of it. Like, no, you've not. No one's heard of Krypton.
Yes, of course, Krypton. Everyone knows Krypton. Krypton, that's in Spain, right? Got it.
With a C. No, it's a K, Lois. It's a K. But, it's very nice, obviously. It is, to be honest, for this movie that is seen as this very, like, good, noble version of Superman from an older era that's very, in some ways, cheesy by the fact that it was made when it was made. It is kind of surprising how raunchy this conversation actually kind of is. Between the is it big, what underwear am I wearing, so like, all these things, it's like there's a surprising amount of, like, we want to have sex in this scene.
I'd counter that in that feels more of the time for me. I feel like we got more and more uptight about that in movies as, we introduced the PG-13 because we were not okay with the things that were in PG. And it's just kind of slowly shifted down the line where you're not going to get this in even a PG-13 nowadays. This is going to be something in R-rated films.
I don't know if I agree with that, because they've gotten softer over the last couple of decades. I think it's kind of...
maybe nowadays, yeah. That'd be fair. But there was that period, I would say, probably early 2000s, where it kind of did hit a peak.
The one thing I will maybe critique here a little bit, especially since it is actively used by the villain later on, I'm like, Superman, maybe don't tell the press your weaknesses, like, because later on Lex knows to put something in lead because he can't see through lead. And I'm like, why would you tell her that? Or at the very least, why would you let her print that? Like, keep that in the down low.
Because the setup for this is she, once again, being raunchy, says, what color is my underwear? Because he has X-ray vision to an extent. And he can't see through a lead-lined plant potter that's in the way. And he says that. He says, like, oh, it's lead. And I'm like, you should have just said, like, oh, I can't see through silk or something like that. Like, anything to just not give away your entire weakness there.
Yeah, how do you feel about his X-ray vision being, like, full color? Because I do think, especially because lead being the blocker actually kind of suggests that it does work like real X-rays, because that's something that real X-rays can't pass through. So that would suggest that his X-ray vision should be, I hate to give Smallville credit, but it should actually be more like an X-ray in terms of how it looks to him.
I'm okay with it because they're treating it as a, like, fanciful thing. Like, at no point are we going into the depths of, like, how does the X-ray vision actually really work? The same way that we don't get into how he can actually fly or anything like that. I think that if we were in a more grounded movie, yes, I would like it to be a little bit more like that. But because we are in this sort of fantastical realm, I'm more okay with the way of them showing, of course, it's just color.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it being a bit ambiguous. Like, I think it's fine if we never actually see what he sees. If he just, like, he just says, oh, I see this kind of thing, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
But, they do show a little bit.
Yeah, they show it a few times.
This is one of those things, though, where I feel like, again, decades of nerds who love Superman making all this work and be more, like, scientifically, not accurate or anything even close to that word, but, like, just makes sense in its own world.
You have to make less assumptions. That's the thing. Like, we've managed to narrow it down of, like, if you just accept this one thing is true, everything else falls out of it.
Yeah. So it's it is actually, now I'm thinking about it, he does not use heat vision in this movie. It comes in later movies, but he does not use it in this movie, so they left that power out for I guess technically super breath as well. But that one tends to get left out a lot.
Yeah, it's very situational. It depends on what you need it for.
Yeah. So yeah, it obviously eventually because she asked, like, how fast can you fly, and he's like, oh, I don't know, I've never tested it. Let's give it a try. Why don't we test it? And all I was thinking is, like, she does not bring a stopwatch with her. There is no testing going on in this following sequence.
1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Don't worry, I'm keeping track. 3 Mississippi.
I mean, I think what I like about this is that, like, he's doing this because he likes her. He's intentionally flirting. There's even a moment where he kind of smirks at her and doesn't answer a question. He's clearly suggesting this flying thing because he does want to in some way impress her. Right? He wants to give her this experience and have it be a little bit magical. And I think that's okay because he is still human. He still has desires. He still cares about things. He's not doing anything malicious here. I think it's okay for him to actually want to flirt and want to kind of impress the girl he likes. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Obviously, the real question comes that, like, the fact that she was dressed up and he, like, makes a little crack about, oh, did you have plans tonight? And then we find out after the flying scene that he did actually make a date with her as Clark as well. Makes it feel extra cheeky in a weird way. Like he's intentionally prodding her in a sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think you could read it in the sort of way of like, all right, let's test to see how much she likes Superman compared to how much she likes Clark. And it's just 100-0 ratio there. It's like everything on Superman and Clark is just left by the wayside.
Well, it's a really, again, you could sort of almost suggest that, like, he's really enjoying, like, how clearly flustered she is when he comes to see her as Clark after the whole date, and she's like sort of like getting words wrong. She's mixing up sentences. Her head's clearly in the sky thinking about Superman, and he's just kind of enjoying it at times a little bit. But then he also, of course, has the moment where she walks out the room. He takes off the glasses. He straightens up. Great, again, performance moment's great there. But then he kind of like sort of looks down at the glasses and thinks, oh, well, this is never going to be real if she doesn't know, like, that I'm really both. Like, she doesn't know that I'm farm boy Clark Kent, you know, like. So I do like that sort of coming into question of like, okay, this has been fun and I'm enjoying playing both parts, but at a certain point I want her to know the real me, which is everything. So, you know, it puts that in.
But then
there.
when she comes back out, he backs down. He doesn't feel comfortable enough doing it yet, and so he gets back into Clark. One thing we kind of skipped over, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but how did you feel about the Can You Read My Mind sequence?
Yeah, I see people maybe not making fun of it, but, you know, criticizing this. And yeah, it's like, I don't think it's stupid in the sense that I think it makes sense why Lois, like, not knowing the extent of his abilities, and like this guy who's shown up who can do everything. Like, I get why she would have the thought. But, you know, it kind of like doubles the length of the entire sequence and doesn't feel like it really adds a whole lot. Like, I think we get from her reactions in the more normal bits where she's talking to Clark after, we get how this has made her feel. I don't know if we need her monologue whilst this is happening. But, you know.
No, I agree. I think the issue with it comes from, we've already had a bunch of flying around. We see this look of wonder, and obviously she's just completely smitten and fallen for Superman at this point. I didn't need a full poem being read while we just continue on with the visuals that confirm that. Like, it seems like a bit too much to make the point that was very clearly there 2 minutes prior.
The performance already did its job. Like, Margot Kidder gave us everything we needed from her acting. We didn't need the monologue. So, you know, I guess that's where I stand on it more than anything else.
I agree.
So, after this, it's pretty much straight into Lex hatching his plan. They do their whole, like, distraction.
I think this is third act, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, this is where it starts.
Yeah, it's like, changes some numbers on the missile that's been transported on a truck, and they basically distract all of the officers by just having Miss Tessmacher be kind of like in need of help, but also in a sexy dress. But Otis gets it wrong, so they have to distract them a second time, so Tessmacher can be the one to change the last numbers.
All right, so yes and no.
Okay.
That's technically incorrect. So the actual thing is there are two missiles. And what the implication here is that they are changing both missiles to go to different targets. So the first one is Otis. The second one is Tessmacher.
Oh, I see.
Tessmacher is the one who sets it to go to the fault line, which we'll get to later. Otis is the one they originally had a location it was supposed to go to, God only knows where, but it ends up being Hackensack, New Jersey, because he messes it up.
Dear. I mean, that makes sense. I guess the reason why it never occurred to me that was like a mistaken destination is because it still felt like it was the opposite of the other missile, and that's the point, is that Superman can't stop both. So it still felt like New Jersey felt like it's the opposite corner of the country, so it makes sense to me, but...
Yeah, and that's probably why he got like the first two numbers right, but then the other two were just misdirecting it from Metropolis or New York over to Hackensack, New Jersey.
Yeah. Well, let's not ask the question, does New York still exist in this version of the universe?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
There's just an extra 500 square miles in the United States. Don't worry about it.
So, right, so that's whatever. The big thing is that Lex intentionally reaches out to Superman with, the high-pitched sound. It's when Clark's talking to Perry, and he hears this, and Lex starts talking to him in a frequency that only Superman could hear.
As I'm watching this, because it starts with a very high-pitched whistle whining noise to simulate what Superman's hearing, my cat was laying on my lap as this scene was going on. That started, and immediately they started freaking out. Immediately I got claws in the legs and just like, son of a bitch, got off me. But like, it jumped me up, it got me aware. So that's some 4D immersion for you.
Yeah, I mean, I like this to an extent. I do think it's weird, like, that we're already at this point with them. It's one of the failings of the Lex plot, I think, in this, is that there's not more of a build to, like, like, Superman's not even aware that Lex Luthor exists until this scene.
I'm all right with it in the sense that this feels like Lex Luthor running tests. This feels like him doing things, and this is where we get into another thing with the extended edition. So just to cut slightly ahead here, Superman bails out of the Daily Planet. He goes and he starts like following Lex's voice around until eventually he pins down where it's from. He does a spinning drill move to like go into the New York sidewalk straight down to where Lex's office is, and then bust down the door into it. However, in the TV/extended editions, there's a hallway of numerous different tests that Lex is running. And I think that's what sets this up as working for me, is this idea that all of this to see how much he can actually handle. It's just Lex getting data on him.
I think the problem for me, though, as much as I like that idea in theory of him testing him, and it's definitely been used in other Superman stories, is that it feels like it doesn't matter in the context of this movie, because he's already deduced how he's going to defeat him, and it works in the theatrical cut. You don't need that little section of him being tested by a flamethrower and whatever else he throws at him, because it just cuts to, he's knocking down the door, and that's it. Like, you don't really need it.
As I said in the beginning, this was the sequence, the walking down the like hallway with different things going on, that I remembered from the extended cut. And so when he bust into the room, all of a sudden I'm like, I could have sworn there was like a machine gun room and like a flamethrower room. Like there was a bunch of other stuff there, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's the extent. Because I grew up with the theatrical cut, and it wasn't until I got the movie on DVD, it was the extended cut. And I was like, what's this extra scene? This is weird. Like, I don't remember this.
Yeah.
Typically I'll pick the theatrical, because I do think the pacing's better overall, but, it's not it's not a huge amount. It's like an extra, like 7 minutes or something like that. It's not a ton.
Right, yeah. So yeah, the basic here is that Lex just lays out his plan. Like he has no issue with what's going on because the missiles have already been launched. It's like too late for Superman to stop them. But he lays out the plan that one of the missiles is going to hit the San Andreas fault line, which will apparently drop half of California into the sea. And his master plan is he's bought up all of the land to the east of the fault line so that it will be the new west coast of America.
Yes. And he's going to name all these different sections, and Otis is taking it upon himself to write in his name into one of the little like cities. He's like, Otisburg will be a place.
Let's not overlook the hilarious joke that Miss Tessmacher gets Tessmacher Peaks down at the bottom of the map.
Yes, they don't say it out loud though, so it's a little visual gag if you catch it. That's all that is. But it's obviously it's very much the villain monologuing his plan kind of thing. But of course, the entire thing here, which at least makes it make sense, is that he wants to lure Superman into the kryptonite, right? What's so funny though is that you could argue that he doesn't need to do that because Superman doesn't know kryptonite exists yet, so he could literally just open the box and just start hurting Superman. But he does go out of his way to have Superman kind of like think that he's figuring out where the cancel launch buttons are, and he like comes over and like Lex is like acting all coy about he's sitting on this lead chest. Like, oh, you think you can hide it from me in lead, you fool? And he picks up the lead kryptonite. Oh no, the pain is too much to take.
That to me feels like an ego play by Lex. He's like, I could just open this box, but I want to outsmart you. I want to force you to do it, because he does, as he's pulling out the kryptonite on a chain, he does say brains over brawn. Like he's showing how he's completely won just by being more intelligent. Yeah.
That's the thing as well, is that everything, all the scenes with him and Otis and Tessmacher as well to an extent, but mostly Otis, it's like him being frustrated that he's surrounded by morons, and I'm like, yeah, but you picked this guy. Like you could have just not had him around if you think he's an idiot.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why modern Lex doesn't really have anyone else with him. If you like, in the general consensus of most public people, obviously for comic readers, there's Mercy, his assistant or whatever, but she's very highly competent. She's someone who is more ride or die with Lex. So I feel like that would work a little bit better for the style of Lex I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's I think that's fair. So yeah, basically he's dumped into the water with a kryptonite chain around his neck. Lex and Otis go to do whatever. However, because Lex has pointed out during this monologue that Hackensack is one of the targets, Miss Tessmacher's like, hey, my mother lives in Hackensack. And he's just like, shrug.
Not anymore.
So this is kind of giving her the extra motivation to maybe, turn face here and help Superman. And so one of the things we've not mentioned yet is that Lois and Jimmy are in like right on the fault line because they're like she's interviewing someone about the real estate stuff going on.
Yeah.
So they're there. They're in danger. So that's important.
Yeah, it's literally just to get them involved with the back half of the plot. Like, they have to be in the location.
So it's like, okay, fair enough, right? Blah blah blah. And Tessmacher's, Superman's like begging, please, like, help me save them. Like I can save them. And she's like, but you have to promise you'll save New Jersey first. Promise me. And you don't lie. You would never lie, would you? And he's like,
yeah, that's part of the news article. I love the implication, though, of it being New Jersey. Like, obviously, there's all these jokes about, like, New Jersey, it's like the armpit of America sort of thing. But it's like, you have to promise me you'll save New Jersey first. And he doesn't, he's obviously not like hesitating or whatever. He's just in pain, but it looks like he's hesitating. He's like, well, I think, all right, I guess.
I think he is hesitating, but it's not because he's bad-mouthing anywhere. I think it's just because he's like, he knows Lois and Jimmy are in the other place. I think it's more the personal attachment to who's there. Yeah. But yeah, so he's, when she takes the thing off, she kisses him first, actually, and he's like, why did you kiss me first? Because you wouldn't have let me do it after. And I'm like, all right, Tessmacher, yeah, creep.
Well, I'll make sure to put in a good word with the police to not get you wrapped up in Lex's stuff, but I am filing sexual assault charges, so goodbye.
So he flies off to get that nuke. Sorry, you get a bit of him flying quickly. It is what it is. But as this, sequence, of course, happens, the other nuke heads for California and hits the fault line. There's tremors, earthquakes, blah blah blah, destruction. And it's fine. We see the Golden Gate Bridge, the school bus is going over the edge of that and whatnot. Do you know what I forgot about this sequence, though? Because obviously Superman races there to help still. I had forgotten him flying underground past molten lava. And then that shot at the end of it where he's like almost like he's picking up like part of the continent to like stop it from breaking apart. And there's just this epic shot of him holding up rock underground with lava and like red lighting in the foreground, and I'm like, this is like so epic. How did I forget this shot?
This is like, I'm talking about the compositing with the flag, and it's still good, but like this sequence here and ending with him like holding the lava up, I'm like, why is this not the marketing promotional shot on everything? Like, this is the coolest thing I can imagine Superman doing, is holding up a continent.
Yeah, it's legitimately special, this shot. And obviously the dam's bursting, Jimmy's almost fallen to his death, and Superman saves him.
They set up that there's the Golden Gate Bridge, there's a dam where Jimmy's on it, there's a house that's downwind of the dam, or not a house, a city, a little town.
It's a whole town,
he has to work on saving that. And then there's also Lois, who is somewhere out elsewhere in the desert, and basically the fault line is chasing her down the desert.
And there's also a train track that's damaged as well that he ends up saving.
Yes.
And there's a lot of miniature stuff where he sort of like blocks the path of the water from the dam he pushes a lot of boulders down to make a new dam effectively. So there's fun stuff around here with him saving all this stuff and whatnot. But after he's sort of done it all and he thinks, okay, I've stopped all these disasters, I think I've like mostly succeeded here. The one thing that's happened in one of the aftershocks is that the ground swallowed Lois's car and she is dead. Like, he hears her last gasps for life. He rushes off to get to her, but when he pulls the car up and he brings her out, she's gone. And he's holding her, and he's performing. Christopher Reeve's doing all the angry crying and whatnot. And this is where we get to the murky ending where, you know, I don't particularly like it for various reasons. One, let's just straight right away. Making the Earth spin the opposite direction to turn back time is just stupid, and it's never not going to be stupid. So let's just get that out of the way first.
Right. I'm immediately going to devil's advocate here, and then I'm going to point out why the devil's advocate is wrong. So, devil's advocate, I think the implication was supposed to be more so of him going so fast, because they talked about relativity and stuff before, and how time passes differently when you go so fast. I think the implication was him going so fast that he does rewind time. Like, that's what I think they were getting across. The downside to that is that they specifically go out of their way to show him stop and then go the opposite direction even more, seemingly getting the Earth going back in the correct direction again.
That's what I was going to say specifically, though, is that they show the Earth spinning backwards and then spinning back forwards again, like he has to put it back in the right direction. So that completely kills that theory.
Yeah. No, if they didn't have that shot, if it was just him going around the other way, I think it could have worked. But as soon as they showed him recorrecting the spin of the Earth, yeah, we had issues.
Yeah, well, there's that element of it I don't like. I remember talking to Connor about this a long time ago, about how you do this whole thing where Jor-El's like voice appears in the clouds and he's like, oh, you cannot interfere with human history, blah, 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 blah. And it kind of feels like he gets away with it and there's no comeuppance. That said, though, my counterpoint to myself with that is the idea that Jonathan's voice comes in to sort of counteract that voice and say, hey, you're here to do something important. And this idea that he's basically having to choose between Jor-El telling him how to live his life or the advice that he got from his actual, like, you know, father that raised him, and is that the more important voice? Is saving her more important? The problem is, though, that he is basically doing like the Barry Allen flashpoint of I'll just rewind time to get what I want. And there isn't like a lesson that's learned as a result of it. It would be one thing if there was a consequence to it. And maybe that's where you can come in with the consequences, is that the bad guys get out the Phantom Zone and like all of that happens because he made this selfish choice. Maybe he could have somehow worked that into like how they get out the Phantom Zone or something. But there's no consequence. He just gets Lois back and it works.
Yeah. I think the other half of that is it is kind of in this weird state now where he rewound time, but like
the time is wonky.
We see the water that was going to hit the town that he put the boulders in the way of rewind back.
Yes.
But theoretically the boulders are still there, so like is there now just two Supermen around? Like if you think about it in any sort of time travel stuff, it gets weird.
Yeah, the time travel qualities here are really stupid as well, because it shows all this stuff rewinding, but that means that, okay, so is there the first Superman who it was in the timeline stopping all this stuff? Is he still driving around stopping it? Because it seems like that's not the case. It seems like when Superman lands next to Lois's car, there's no aftershocks or anything. So it's like, how far back did you rewind? Did you just stop the nuke from even like hitting in the first place?
Yeah. So thematically, what I think is, you're talking about the consequence and stuff like that. I don't think that's really the idea that it's going for here. What I think thematically is happening is, yes, we get the conversation between his two fathers, of one saying you can't meddle with human history and the other saying you've got something special for you. But if you think back to what I was saying earlier with Pa Kent's death, of this idea that even Superman has limits, even Superman can't do this, can't do that. This is kind of just for the audience's sake to say, no, Superman can do anything. Superman is able to do anything so long as he like tries, as long as he like really like puts his effort into it. Well, okay, there is a place for that.
If that's what it's supposed to be, then I don't like it, because I actually disagree with that. I think there has to be a limit.
Okay.
Superman can't do anything. I disagree with that.
That's the difference between modern age Superman and golden age Superman, because golden age Superman could do anything. Like, that was his whole thing, is that he could literally do anything he wanted to. And I think there is a place for that, especially when the movie is going for this super optimistic feeling to it, this idea of here's a man who is capable of doing all the things you wish you could do. And it's kind of a level of wish fulfillment in a way to see him succeed at this thing.
But I don't think the whole thing with the father's death earlier on, where he says, oh, I couldn't save him, that doesn't to me feel like it's setting up something that he's going to like correct later or like realize he was wrong about. To me, that's like setting up a hard rule that there is limitations.
Right.
And it's why I don't think this ending, beyond the stupid, like, you know, time travel element of it, that is just nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with you. I don't like the ending the way it's presented. I do think it is too much of an easy out here.
Yeah.
But the fact that we get Christopher Reeve acting as hard as he did in that sequence.
Oh, sure.
To get to that point, I'm happy that we had that. And I'm also okay with the idea of Superman doing something that feels even bigger in order to save the day. Obviously, him just making it in the barely minimum time to be able to save Lois kind of wouldn't have that same punch to it, but it would require a full restructuring to be able to correct everything else here.
So 2 more points on this. One, Jimmy runs up afterwards and still says that Superman left him on the road, implying that he was still saved by Superman. So that the idea that there is a second Superman who still had to do all the other things, except Lois would still be alive at the end of it, so he wouldn't reverse time, creating a paradox. So that's a whole thing on itself.
Yes.
But whatever, that's maybe nitty gritty nerdy like stuff. The other thing, what was I going to say? What was the other thing? The other thing was, the other thing, this is important to mention here, is that the Earth spinning backwards stuff was meant to be the ending of 2. That wasn't originally going to be the ending of 1.
Oh. Okay, but I mean, I haven't really seen 2 in a while either. I don't know what that would really be correcting at the end of 2, but fair enough.
Well, there's a straight answer to that, but just for the sake of not spoiling the next movie, I won't say.
Right.
But
fair enough.
it's a much simpler thing it's fixing, but the idea is that he would somehow get to the nuke, I guess, and throw it into space, and that would be releasing the Kryptonian villains from the Phantom Zone, and they kind of reworked it when they realized they wanted to take the. I think they decided that it wasn't big enough, so they wanted the Earth thing in the end of 1. So they took that, which they basically shot the Earth spinning stuff for 2, and they reworked it, whatever.
Right.
So I just wanted to mention that here because it's important to note. But
makes sense.
Afterwards, there's a couple of nice moments where he flies off, and like Jimmy says, "Oh, I think he likes you, Miss Lane." He's like, "Yeah, of course Clark cares about me." He's like, "No, him." And she's like, he cares about everyone, Jimmy.
Yeah. And they even make the little point here of being like, it's too bad Clark wasn't here to see this. And Lois is like, wait a minute. Nah.
Yeah. The very on the nose, like, she had the ID but then dismissed it is very old school. That's something you wouldn't really do today, I think.
And then we get the whole reason he was running off was because he's like, I have to put Lex Luthor in jail. And we finally get the running gag throughout the movie was that there's a bunch of hair pieces and wigs all sitting around his thing. So when he finally gets dropped off in jail, he rips it off and says, "It is I, Lex Luthor."
Which I think is just like, this was like them compromising because he didn't really want to shave his head, at least not for that long. So it's like, okay, we'll have hair for most of the movie and then we'll just do like the one bald reveal at the end.
Well, that was a skull cap. Like, that was a bald cap.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense, yeah. Yeah, but I think that's why he wasn't just bald the whole movie, is because he just didn't want to do it. Which, actually, on that, not a little bit of trivia for you here. Not Lex Luthor. Gene Hackman, when he was cast in this role, had a mustache. And he did not want to shave the mustache. He was adamant he wanted to keep his mustache.
Hold on, something in a Superman movie and mustache problems. I'm having flashbacks.
Or flash forwards, in this case.
Yeah.
So Richard Donner, who had not met him in person yet, told him over the phone, "Look, if you shave your mustache, I'll shave mine. Deal?" And he's like, "All right, deal." So he showed up the first time he ever met Richard Donner, on set, wherever it was, maybe in a meeting, and he's like, "All right, I shave my mustache. Here you go." And Richard Donner peeled off a fake mustache, revealing that he had tricked him into shaving his mustache.
Yep. To be fair, I'm sure Richard Donner could grow facial hair, so at some point he's shaved off some stubble or something.
That's true. That's true.
A mustache.
I don't know if he met him a few times with the fake mustache first before the big reveal or something, but like that was the main bit
so
of it.
Extra.
Yeah, but the main thrust of it is that he tricked him into shaving his mustache off by agreeing that he would also do it, but he didn't actually have one. So,
well, good on him. I mean, Gene Hackman I think is good in the role. I think he's a very solid Lex, but to have the sort of Cesar Romero sort of thing with the Joker where it's like, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to shave my face. Like, come on, man. It's a multi-million-dollar movie. You can't make this one concession.
Yeah, it'll grow back. After, like once you're done with the movie, it'll grow back in like a month. You're fine. What are you whinging
like,
about?
It's the same sort of thing with Marlon Brando. Like, he's a pain to work with, and obviously he caused a lot of problems during this shoot, just in terms of like, I think I read a trivia saying you film all of the rehearsals as well, because, if we get it there, then great. I don't have to do it later. Like, that's the sort of thing where it's like, bro, just do your job. What are you doing?
Yeah. So yeah, after he drops Lex off at the prison, and the warden's just like, "Oh, thank you, Superman, you saved everyone," and he flies out. I'm like, "Yeah, trial though, right? Like, we could go through the court system here."
Nah, this is Guantanamo. You just drop them off. No anything. And then we do get the one shot that I think is just super solid of low Earth orbit. We see the sun cresting over the edge of the Earth, and then Superman smiles at the camera and flies off. Like, great shot.
Yeah, perfect couple of final shots, credits roll, beautiful. So, yeah, there's a lot to love here, right? And there's a lot to nitpick and take apart and sort of critique and say why it doesn't necessarily work as a full-on story with a, I think there's a lot of things in here we'd be a lot more critical of in a modern movie trying to adapt a superhero. But this looks so good. The music, the performance from Reeve, like all these things like really add up and do feel special, and it gets you over a lot of the humps that you otherwise would have. So there's a lot to love here for sure, and we'll get into all that. So, all right, David, what are you rating Superman out of 10?
I'm thinking I'm at a 9 for this. It's just all around, it's a great movie. The way it was produced, obviously, we went on and on about the production values and stuff like that on it. There's a few things to nitpick. It's not a perfect movie by any stretch, but I think that in terms of what I would want out of a Superman movie, this hits it closer than I think any other superhero movie has hit for any other hero, and that includes like Batman and stuff like that. Like, I think that this is the closest you can get to like the comic identification of what Superman is put to film. So very solid.
Yeah, I have to concur with the 9. Like I was saying earlier, the visuals are stunning. It feels like a big cinematic movie that wanted to make it feel special and important. And then the fact that you have this performance from Reeve and you have the music, which is just an all-timer and completely like defines what a character sounds like, where you can't you can't think of a shark sneaking up on someone without hearing the Jaws theme. You can't think of Superman without hearing this. Both John Williams, funnily enough, but it's special in so many ways that even with some relative, and I would say they're fairly big critiques of what the story is in the back half of the movie, but it just nails the introduction of the character so much that it's like, you know what? Give us the good story in 2. We can wait till 2 for the good story that has a more fleshed out thing, and then we'll see how 2 delivers on that next time. So that's something to look forward to.
So in terms of making the cut,
yes, well, obviously it makes the cut. I mean, at least
makes the cut. I am very strongly in the camp here. I think a cut above. I think it does actually get into that. I think that if I were to collect physical media of DVDs and Blu-rays, this would be one that would make the full selection without even thinking about it.
DVDs in 2025. What are you, a caveman? Like,
Absolutely. We behind the curtain, Pete sat me down for like 20 minutes discussing how far behind the curve my PC is. So yes, I am behind the curve.
Whoa. Yes, only because your recordings keep being messed up because the computer's buckling at the knees. It's not like a snobby thing.
I was born with this Dell, and I will die with this Dell.
Yeah, I honestly, in the context of superhero movies especially, I think it is a cut above. Like, I think there's like a handful of superhero movies that are in this special, like, S tier ranking. I think the other ones, Dark Knight, I think probably, is up there.
Right.
Is arguably a better film overall than this in some ways. But I think that those 2 are in this tier, and there's probably a couple of Marvel ones that get close to it, and maybe it's my DC love that says they don't, but like I do think this and Dark Knight are like 2 of the most special superhero movies. And
I mean, obviously we'll cover the 3rd over on Extra Reels when we do Steel. That's definitely going to be up there.
Yes, which is coming this month, as a matter of fact, is a tie-in to Superman season, because Steel, if you didn't know, is a Superman related character.
Yes.
Not
as is Shaquille O'Neal, just by himself.
Not that the movie Steel will ever reference Superman. Like, the movie does not acknowledge that that connection. But in the comics, Steel is related to Superman, not as a family relative, just as a, you know, he's Superman connected.
Tangential.
Yes. But yeah, you know, X Reels is one of the shows you can get on Patreon or via YouTube membership, where we review some of the worst movies ever made once a month. It's a good time, not for us, we're miserable usually, but it's a good time for you to hear us go crazy. So if that sounds like fun, you can check out that. We also have Criterion Cut, which is a Patreon / YouTube member show, so you can get that as well. Plus there's other bonuses, and one of the things we are doing now, you might have noticed over the last few episodes that the extra ratings that we did before, you know, best video, or, you know, or not best, but like how would you score the video, the audio, the acting?
Right.
We've actually started like trimming that out and putting that up as a Patreon or YouTube member, little extra feature. The real reason for it, honestly, is some of the videos were getting so long that the audio size limits were starting to become an issue. So it was a way to trim out 10 minutes. But we still like doing them, so if you like those segments where we rate all those individual elements and just give a couple of extra little like tidbits, then, you know, you can get that on Patreon or YouTube membership. So going forward, all Collector's Cut and Ace episode, which is a sci-fi movie podcast that we also do together, if you haven't checked that out, they'll all have this bonus feature now, like the day after on Patreon. So,
and thank God this episode didn't go too long. This is practically a short film, all things considered.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. We're like less than a minute away from 2 hours and 40 on the video recording.
Yes.
So I'm glad that at least 10 minutes of this is getting cut out by default, because otherwise we'd be screwed. I'm hoping that the sequels won't go as long, but here, you know, everyone pray for us. Pray for the sequels being shorter than this.
I think we'll be fine on the rest of the series, and maybe James Gunn's one will go longer just because we need to talk about the new movie stuff.
Oh, but yeah, there'll be a lot of new stuff to talk about in that, quite right. But hopefully you enjoyed us talking about this. It's a little bit different when it's an adaptation of something we both care about and have lots of opinions on Superman. So hopefully that was a fun listen at the very least. But we will see you next time for Superman 2. And, you know, as always, you know, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff on on YouTube, sorry, but also support us on Patreon or YouTube membership, or even a one-time super thanks if that, you know, any support from any direction is greatly appreciated. But that is the show, so thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity, especially if you're from Krypton.